We're gonna do one last topic. It's 1 more hour, and we're ending stream. I'm not happy. Everybody be productive from now on, because there's no longer mutes. You're getting kicked.
Who decides that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. You're done.
I'm sorry.
You're done, mate. You're done. You're done for.
Yeah, it's really blurring who's the left and who's the right in this.
Well, Dari likes playing devil's advocate for the sake of the argument.
That's true.
I'm
I
not
do.
playing devil's advocate at all. I'm just not a statist like most of the people on this panel are.
True. Okay. So we're gonna go around and we're gonna start with Scuff Dario. Scuff Dario, who are you, and how? And I enjoyed your role in the last Star Wars film. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you very much, Dylan. You're always appreciate a fan. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Scuff Dario on Twitch. I do politics. I do debate content or talking about debates or talking about rhetoric, arguments, how to do good arguments, how to do bad arguments, how to see when somebody's making a bad argument. I would say I self-identify as a neoliberal, socially democratic, anarcho-Marxist, Leninist monarchist. If you don't know what that is, you'll probably find out during the debates. And I'll just say that while everybody's there brandishing their guns, I brought a knife to a gunfight.
Oh no.
That's the most dangerous guy in the room.
It's very scary.
You'll find out later.
Dario, I think we have some people who have gentle hearts in chat, so can you please turn it down a little bit, okay? Thank you.
Gentle hearts?
Gentle hearts, you might cause somebody to have an episode if you keep acting in such a brutish manner with weapons, okay?
Listen, Dylan, okay? Sometimes when you're passionate about something, you need an avenue to show your passion, and I'm very passionate.
You already exposed him as a Sith. You exposed his stiffness.
Yeah.
He's got to.
Well, Dario,
Are you down with the stiffness?
I'm ready to take you on any day of the week. I just want you to know that, okay? Okay. Anyway, last username. You'll next.
Hey, I'm last username. I live in Canada, and we're not allowed to play with guns. The Royal Canadian nanny, Justin Trudeau, took our guns away. So I don't know if I'll have a whole lot to say, but I will try to say some stuff about guns. And yeah, good to be here.
Okay, wonderful. Next is BrentoBox.
Hey everyone, BrentoBox from Seattle, and I don't have real hard takes on guns, except that I do believe that people have a right to own a gun. And I actually think it's important. So.
Okay, next we have Ross.
Hey, Ross W. Lewis. I'm a senior consultant at one of the big four consulting firms. I'm a data analyst, software engineer, big data technical specialist with a master's in applied economics. Politically, I'm a moderate libertarian paternalist with conservative and nationalistic leanings. And in my stream, I learn Chinese. So tune in if you want to learn some Chinese.
Okay, cool. So is that with the CIA or what you doing? Why are you learning Chinese? Do you just enjoy it?
I can't tell you that, Dylan.
Ah, okay. CIA. So freemz.
Freemz, you muted.
Okay, that was freemz's intro. Grumple Silskin.
Cool. Oh, no. I am a network engineer by trade, and I stream mostly cleaning up a building. Okay. Sometimes I do a little bit of network, like enterprise level network engineering training. I haven't done it yet, but the plan is to also do a little bit of shooty stuff.
Okay, so if you want to watch anybody clean their room, you can always turn into Grumple Stilson's channel. It's exciting content.
Number one garage cleaning stream on Twitch.
I do think he has that market on lock at the moment.
I have it wholly locked down. Number one garage cleaning stream on Twitch.
He does. Dary.
Hey, I like arguments as well. Big surprise. I also like guns. I'm a patriot, and I want the U.S. to be the best. And so arguments will eventually get us there.
Awesome. Got it. And MindWaves.
Me. I don't know you.
Yeah, I'm a dude. I do. I talk about stuff like this, and I'm here now to talk about guns. So yeah, poggers.
Okay, and we'll go back. Grumple Soskin, was there a problem?
Well, MindWaves had felt the need to say he's a dude, so I questioned it because he felt the need to say he was a dude.
Cool.
MindWaves is a dude. I can confirm that.
I'm glad we got that out of the way.
Can we confirm or deny?
I'm glad we're clearing this out of the way. I believe MindWaves is a
These
dude.
roasts are so vicious.
right out the
So
gate.
vicious.
Precisionally pointed at.
Yeah,
God,
Freemz, I gotta throw
great.
Freemz. I'm on fire currently. The burn was too hot. I need you to introduce yourself.
All right. Yeah, I'm Freemz. I do political roundtables. I've been on a bit of a hiatus, about 3 weeks. By the time I'll start back Monday, I'm also bringing back Doomer Hours, so come check that out. And yeah, this is my first debate roundtable I've been on in like probably a month and a half, 2 months. So.
Oh, well, I'm happy for you to come back in on my platform, Freeze. I appreciate it, and thank you. I'm happy to also have the alcohol industry's vote in the recent elections.
Hell yeah, dude.
Thank you. Okay, so everybody's introduced themselves, and we're gonna go straight into it. The only other person we could expect tonight is Sledge, because Tokahanis also did
Sledge
not
good
show.
people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, where's fucking Tokahanis?
She has canceled on me twice in a row, and this will be the third time.
She probably was like, "Oh shit,
Really?
Freemz and MindWaves again."
Yeah. She said I'll be over next week, and then I messaged her, and then nothing happened.
She didn't want that smoke.
She didn't want that gun smoke. Aha. Okay. Okay.
Clever.
Wait, what do you mean by that,
He had a lot of
Dylan?
things to say.
I mean, as the
What do you mean
smoke
by
that
that?
produces off of the end. Okay, the first question. In this, okay, so we're gonna start off with some philosophy. I want to thank Les Username for helping me figure out what the questions and what kind of way they should be and what order. We're gonna start off with a little bit of philosophy. Is the statement the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun? Is a good guy with a gun correct? I'm gonna.
Yes.
Well, debate over. We're gonna start over with Ross Lewis.
Finish it.
Ross
Done.
Lewis will be the
Over.
first guy. And let me clarify the rules. During other people's opening statements, you do not talk over them. You will be muted if you do.
Wait, this is the topic?
This is the first topic out of 3 topics about guns.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
This is a
the
gun
second one is
time.
specifically gets into control. We started off with philosophy, MindWaves. We're moving into the big brain stuff. You know, you're from the Big Brain
Gotcha.
Podcast. You should, be able to
Not
tackle
ready
this.
for it. I
We can
wouldn't know
all
anything
seven
about
head
that.
here, right?
We can all
like,
big head. We're all big brain.
most of the people here.
So,
We can all seven head it.
okay. So everybody, do not interrupt anybody else during the opening statements. After opening statements, then you can go back and forth. all you-
Wait, Dylan.
Oh boy.
I'm sorry, I'm kidding.
I'm about to fuck.
Go.
Okay, I'm about to become the No Brain Podcast in a few seconds because my brain cells are frying. Okay, last time anyone interrupts me, this time they don't get an intro. Okay, do not interrupt anyone else during their intro. Then we'll open it up to the floor. You can talk until we have
But
any
Dylan, what if
statements.
I Sorry, go.
That's a mute.
Yep, that is a mute. Okay, so.
He banned himself. from the chat.
He muted and immediately knew it was a mute. He immediately knew. Okay, Russ Lewis, fuck it. Everybody knows the rules. I'm done explaining them. Russ Lewis, go.
Okay, so the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. In so many circumstances, this is obviously correct. Unless you're talking about tranquilizer darts or tasers, these aren't nearly as effective as a gun. I mean, if you consider a teenager who just killed 5 people in one classroom, moving to another classroom, the fastest way is to have either armed security guards or armed teachers bring that student down so that more deaths aren't caused. And then, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of statistics that the studies that have done say there's around 500,000 to 2.5 million times in which guns are used in self-defense in the US. And they're needed to be used because police officers usually get to the scene around 6 to 8 minutes. So in that time, something really bad could happen with that bad guy with the gun.
Okay, next is Scuff Dario.
Sure. I think when you look at the statement at face value, it's sort of like a very obvious yes. Like very obviously, I mean, if somebody's going crazy with a gun, the easiest way to stop that person is somebody else who has a gun or like a bigger gun or whatever. However, I don't think that's really that much of an interesting question. I think when you look deeper into it, we can ask ourselves, well, how do we actually stop like all the bad people in the future with guns from like doing bad things with those guns? And I think when you look at it like that, or like when you look deeper into the question, a lot of different answers come up. How do we prevent people from doing bad things with guns? Yeah.
Hey, Grumple, if you could mute your mic when you're not talking, just in case the dog barks in the future.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Last username.
Little tiny puppy.
The question was, how do you stop people with guns? Not how do we prevent people from doing bad things with guns? I mean, we can certainly prevent people from doing bad things with guns, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a few people who do those bad things anyway, and ultimately you got to stop them somehow. So as long as there's going to be, at least one of those people out there, then you eventually have to stop some people with guns, the good guys with guns.
Okay. Next is BrentoBox.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, no one can deny that. Either through deterrence or just through, retaliation or like equal force. Yeah, there's a gun is kind of like the ultimate personal weapon. I mean, unless you want to get really weird in something else like, military sci-fi. Yeah. Ultimately, if there is someone who you don't trust or who's trying to do harm to people with a gun, you want someone who you trust or a good guy to have a gun or equal force to protect you or to deter it.
Wonderful. Freemz.
Yeah, so as someone who's fairly pro-gun, I hate that quote. I think it's stupid. Because obviously that's not the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun as a good guy with a gun. Sounds ridiculous. I think like less than 1% of violent crimes were stopped by like quote-unquote good guy with a gun. I don't know. I feel like there's better ways to make the argument than good guy with a gun.
Okay, wonderful. Grumple Stiltskin.
100% yes. The good guy with the gun who also has the fortitude to actually use it to stop the bad thing that's happening. 100%.
Okay.
Because when
sorry.
the last thing, when you need a police officer, last 2 months notwithstanding, when you need a police officer in seconds, they're only minutes away.
Okay. Next, Dary.
Yeah, so the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. It's kind of a meme. I mean, you can just answer that question, a bigger gun, right? And that'll basically do it. But the facts are with guns is that even the most highly trained people that use guns struggle with life-threatening situations. So expecting good guys, that implies random civilians to have adequate training to actually be in these combat situations and do well and perform well. The actual question itself is a little circular because we're already in a situation where the scenario is everybody has guns. So now what do we do when we should be taking a step backwards?
Okay, next it's going to be the MindWaves.
He's still muted.
Well, thank you for the opening statement, MindWaves. We're going to open it to the floor. Okay, MindWaves. I'll let you talk. I think he learned his lesson. Okay, MindWaves.
Thank you, Dylan. So yeah, I think that the question of like, can a good guy stop a bad guy with a gun is like really lazy. I think what people refer to when they say that shit is like this Wild West idea that you're going to be the cowboy in the fucking bank that's like shoots the bank robber or some shit, right? Which just is not going to be the case, and statistically is shown to like not be the case. Most people that privately own firearms and carry them out in public rarely use their firearms successfully in self-defense. That is not to say that they shouldn't have the right to own these firearms, but I think that we should be focusing more on who are the bad guys, who are the good guys. Can we make sure that the bad guys necessarily like or if you want to call them that, I guess, don't have those guns? That's the more interesting question in my opinion.
How and why?
Okay, I will now open it to the floor. Okay, opening to the floor. If you want to engage with that.
Why, MindWaves?
How and why what?
How and why are you going to prevent bad guys from having guns and using them against people?
Do you want people with suicidal ideation to own a firearm?
Unless it's been proven that they are not capable, then I mean, it's everybody's right.
So if they're proven to not be capable of like having a firearm, if they're shown to have suicidal ideation and likely to use a gun in suicide, like, in the act of suicide, you'd want to take that gun away from them, right?
I didn't say that. I'm not sure where I stand.
I am saying that I would want to take that.
I'm not sure where I stand on limiting people's suicidability.
Okay, well,
I'm not sure where I stand on that.
Okay,
like
so
I didn't know we were going to get into that.
The most
tonight.
successful means of suicide is with a firearm, right?
Oh yeah, it's the most successful, and it's also men that usually use a firearm. By the way,
exactly.
Just, if we can gender for just a second, it's usually men that women usually use pills, men usually use a firearm. That's what happens statistically.
Yeah, and so
I'm not sure that
they don't have that firearm, so that men who commit suicide at a disproportional rate can't kill themselves. That'd be great. Yeah.
If somebody wants to die, I mean, I'm not sure really where I stand on this. If somebody really wants to die, who are you to tell not to?
Okay, if they really want to die and there's a good reason for it, then we can talk about euthanasia. But that's not the debate today. Okay.
I mean, that's where you just went.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not arguing either way. I'm just saying I'm not sure where I stand on that whole thing because that's a really weird, deep topic.
I think if we look at what the question was, is that the only thing that stops a bad guy with gun is a good guy with gun, is we have to actually look at what guns do in self-defense situations. And if we focus on that topic, I think we can actually answer that question. Because is it correct? Well, if we look at what happens during self-defense gun usage, or SDGU, as it's said in statistics, we can see that it's more likely to cause property damage, more likely to cause harm. The very premise of owning a gun seems to statistically raise your chances of harm, both of yourself and of children. And if you engage in a violent act during a shootout fantasy, that will statistically make you have more harm. So
I'm the actual good guy with the gun. I carry every day, dude.
Sure, you can be. And let's just say, you're the.
I was an instructor in the Marine Corps.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm also a Marine vet. So back in 2008.
Oh, hey, cool.
Yeah.
So, I was 9/11 until 2008.
Oh, okay. So I got in like right after you got out then.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so one
of my B billets was I was an instructor.
Nice. So then you should know that people. I was never in a situation where I had to fire upon somebody, but of course every sergeant has their story, and people freeze up. People freeze up. They get on, top of the.
You don't. Here's the thing. You don't raise to the situation. You fall back to your last level of mastered training. That's literally what happens. When a situation happens, nobody rises to the situation. You fall back on your last level of master training.
Sure. Okay. So it's great. So we're already at the point where we're discussing that people necessary to actually engage in self-defense with weapons should be people that are highly trained. And I agree. And so I think already there's a very bipartisan approach that I think people can take when it comes to weapons in this country, and training is a big part of that. So before the first thing you talked about, I already agree with you, and training should be a fundamental requirement for.
It's on every single friggin' person to, get the training. I really hate that people like go get CHLs, never touched the fucking firearm before. Pardon my French, y'all. Sorry.
It's okay. Your dog already said the N-word, so I mean. Yeah, what?
Yeah, no, so like, wouldn't you be for like a system that required people to actually go out and prove that they know how to use a firearm, or knowledgeable about gun safety and etc.? Like,
no, it's on them. Murder is still illegal.
Well, no, it's not just on them though, right? Because the problem is that when you don't put these like measures into place, it ends up causing harm, right? Either they end up causing harm to other people, they end up causing harm by negligence, and then other people get their firearm in
negligence is
ways.
The number one motherfucker that kills more people than anything.
Yeah,
No, suicide.
in this case, like particularly like with a firearm, right? That's probably something you don't want to be negligent with.
In regards to fire, sorry, my little puppy is talking to me.
Oh, I didn't realize that's what that was.
Hey, may I stop right there for a
Tiny
second?
itty bitty dog.
Negligence being the number one thing that kills people, I heavily disagree with. Unless you mean negligence referring to something else, suicide kills about 2/3 of Americans. Almost 2/3 of Americans is by suicide. So,
Wait, are you saying with guns, or are you just saying like general? Are you saying like nationwide period?
Firearm usage, yeah,
Yep.
negligence is the
Okay.
is
Okay.
a horrible. I might have been off base with the number one, but negligence is
less. It's much tinier than that.
people being negligent.
I would like you to elaborate. Maybe I don't understand you, because where does negligence fit in with the fact that 2/3 of Americans died of suicide by firearms?
Where's the other third?
The other third is mass shooting, homicide, police.
Oh, there goes MindWaves.
He's saying 2/3 of gun deaths.
2/3 of firearms in this country, about 61%, is suicide. So I'm just curious how negligence fits into that.
Hang on, just my numbers don't exactly match up with yours.
Sure.
Are you talking
I
about from just suicides via firearms, or suicides also involving
Just firearms.
police?
Nope, specifically suicide.
No, I don't want to get into the whole thing
So
right now. But
40,000 people die from firearm-related deaths in the U.S. every year, and 1/3 of that is homicides. The rest is suicides.
Basically, yeah.
oh, maybe I'm wrong then.
Yeah.
So if negligence is not a huge factor in gun deaths, then that would seem to suggest
Negligence.
the training.
I mean, I
really, the training licensing
Like
scheme
paying
is not
5,000
going to make a significant difference to that problem, right?
I had wrong numbers. I
No
apologize.
worries. Oh, no worries, no worries. I'm here to just have the conversation.
Did you know that the U.S. is in the 9th place in the world on firearm-related deaths per population? It's behind only Honduras,
Yes, I did know
Venezuela,
that.
El Salvador, Jamaica, Brazil, Colombia, and Panama.
Oh, wait. Hello.
interesting.
Where are you from? Guess what? The overall suicide rate is still per capita higher in your country than the United States, buddy. Even considering the firearms.
Got him.
Before you do some comparisons, it's actually sad, because if we dealt with firearms in this country, our rate of suicide would be much lower than any other Western country. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, because
Not to mention
suicide wouldn't happen if the suicides by gun didn't happen. That's how it works.
Not to mention that there's like actually like a fiscal incentive to deal with this problem as well. We spend more on the societal cost of firearm injury than we do the Department of Education, by almost twice as much. It's pretty insane.
Can you link me that?
What do you need?
Yeah.
Any of the things, any
Find
sources?
the reference on that, because I'm really interested in.
Yeah, definitely. I'll shoot it to you right now. I'll even put it in Twitch chat.
Don't
To,
you-
to
don't you
Dary and
guys think-
MindWaves.
Yeah, wait. In Dylan's Twitch chat.
Yeah, I have the sources ready for anything that I talk about, by the way. I only had like 12 hours to prepare since Dylan was like, hey, do you want to be on my show? And I'm like, I got shit to do all day tomorrow. I got up at like 7 a.m. It was this shit show.
Don't you think
Yeah,
it's
so
like a weird argument to have, like that argument in general about the good guy with the gun, like because it all, like I said, it literally works in less than 1% of violent crimes. So it's like, yes, we're gonna give.
But even if it saves one life, though, right?
Yeah, but you could argue that not having the guns there to begin with would save more lives.
But they're still going to be there, even if you didn't want them to be.
In
the United States, anyway.
What do you mean? What are you saying?
Because there are too many guns to effectively regulate them out of existence.
Right. So, but okay.
It's
So
not a feasible thing right now.
So like only 30% of America owns those guns, though. So if someone who didn't have a gun and wanted to commit a crime, it would be significantly harder for them to go get a gun. I'm actually pro-gun. I just think that this argument's a stupid way to have the argument. Like it's not the best way to have this debate. If you're pro-gun.
I'm getting on.
Can I just quickly ask you, Dari, in terms of the suicide rates, where are you getting your data from? Because I'm looking at 2016 numbers, and it says that the U.S. is way higher in suicide than Denmark. So
I'm getting it for worldpopularreview.com, CDC, Our World in Data, and just the wiki.
So when is that from? Can you link?
What year?
I've got
Sure,
them here.
sure. I got I got a few links.
Yeah, just so we know like what we're talking about. So when I look at suicide rates by country per 100,000 people adjusted for age, it says United States has 13 per 100,000 people, and Denmark has 9.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at the Our World in Data suicide.
When is that from? It might be from a different year. I'm just curious.
This one should be recently revised. This is usually my go-to. If they have the stats for it, it's usually my go-to because they keep it pretty up to date.
Hey, MindWaves. I'm in Dylan's chat now.
Just curious.
Yep. No worries, dude.
I DM'd it to you on Discord.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I think the interesting question here. I mean, obviously. If somebody's already having a gun and doing something bad with it, I think that's already a failure in terms of like what the community, what the state, what the country should be doing. I think the much more interesting question is, how do you prevent bad guys from doing bad things with guns, and how do you prevent bad guys from having guns in the first place? Because I think the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to make sure that he doesn't have a gun. I think that's by far and large the best way. I think the way that you do that is through heavy background checks. It's through a lot of different things that different states have already done to make sure that either you have to go through a lot of hoops, or you have to keep your gun in a safe storage all the time where people can't access it. All of these things reduce gun deaths like tremendously.
Being a legal requirement to lock things up is horrible.
Well, if you have to lock it up,
you should do it.
40,000 people dying every year from gun deaths is also horrible. I mean,
here's something
is that the 1/3? Or is that the 1/3?
No, that's like
what is it, Justin?
How would locking it up prevent that, though?
Well, it would prevent children from getting firearms and causing harm through that. Those means it would prevent gun deaths or criminals coming into your house or any other family member coming into your house and then using your firearm for criminal purposes, right? We already spend $911 million per year on firearm injury hospitalization. Most of this is due to
being suicide, though. I'm
going to pretend like you didn't say that, Grumple. So basically,
wait, hold on. Let me
responsibly storing your firearm is actually like a really good way of preventing people that shouldn't have your personally owned firearm, like preventing them from even having access to it.
I don't disagree at all.
I kind of disagree because the point.
But didn't we just go through where 2/3? I mean,
suicide is the.
Am I dumb? Do I not know how to listen?
How many bad people with guns?
Probably the prior.
I can't figure out how
I
you
can see the point where it's 2/3 of shooting deaths are suicide. Did I not just concede that point? So we take that as reality now?
I can bring them to A to B or to someone else.
Dylan, this is going to be a rough one.
Yeah.
How many of the bad people with guns stole their gun from someone who failed to lock it up?
I'm just a big dumb gorilla, guys. It's serious.
So it seems like, from what I've been able to find, it seems like California is the state with the strictest gun laws in the country. And if you look
California,
at how
New York,
much,
Massachusetts, Chicago,
if you look at how much that California has reduced their gun deaths since having such strict gun laws, it is currently the 44th, I think, in gun deaths, while being like one of the most highly populated and like most dense areas of like population generally.
Do you mind if I steal your source?
Right, but if you think about it, there weren't so many suicides 100 years ago or mass shootings 100 years ago. I think a lot of these issues are coming from like what America is now, and having people dealing with living in the 21st century and committing suicide because of them having to deal with it, rather than just what the laws are. I mean, so you can say the same thing about Chicago compared to California and how Chicago doesn't the way
though.
Well, that's definitely the case, and I do agree that there's a lot of societal factors that compound the gun issue, but I don't think that takes away from the fact that we do have an issue with how guns are regulated in our country. You talk about like how guns were 100 years ago, but like how we viewed guns societally and to what degree people owned them privately 100 years ago was not at all the same as it is today. like we've increased gun ownership in the United States just over the past, I think, like 20 to 30 years.
Mostly during the Obama years. That's honestly the biggest.
Yeah, they ticked up really fucking high, and this is like, I mean, the more firearms you have, it seems we're the most armed country, and yet the least safe when it comes to gun violence out of any other modern country or developed country, right? So like, I think that goes to show that we really do have a problem with the sort of culture of guns in the United States, and I think that you're right to say that other factors compound that, but I don't think that takes away from the gun issue.
But if you removed cities from gun deaths, I mean, gun deaths would drop dramatically. I mean, most.
Well, yeah, but that's like saying if we got rid of like the majority of people in the United States, people just like
if we deported all men from the United States, crime would drop drastically, like violent crime.
I'm just trying to say that I think this is a very urban issue and not a rural issue, and I think it's not like we have this history in our country that's based on individual liberties, things that came from the Declaration of Independence, free will, sovereignty of the individual, and in order to do some kind of mass gun legislation, you'd kind of have to undo what we have, like what the founding of our country is, or maybe what the values that are in the soul of America are, which I think is like one step deeper than what are the statistics, because I'm sure like Dari and Dario have a lot of data that says how many gun deaths the U.S. has compared to other countries, and I could look at plenty of Heritage Foundation's studies that say how important it is to have guns. So I think a way more interesting conversation is the values or the culture that we have in America, and how maybe right now it doesn't align with the foundation of the country, and maybe we should go back to what the foundation of the country was, or maybe we should do something new. But I think right now we have this cognitive dissonance as a country.
I think it's.
I disagree with almost all of that.
Are you saying that is your argument basically saying that it's in cities? It's basically saying that like gun violence occurs in like hot spots, but isn't necessarily like a national like problem, like widespread?
Yeah, as far as I heard, just certain zip codes have the lion's share of gun deaths.
Yep.
Right.
The denser the population, the more gun deaths there are.
But per capita, rural areas are not that much lower. Like I think I was looking at the thing, urban areas are like 8.4, where rural is like 6. So there's still a lot of gun deaths in rural areas.
Right. It's just not in such high amounts because obviously the cities are like more densely populated, right? That's why I said of course if you get rid of the population, then we're gonna have less like deaths, but like that doesn't account for like a per capita.
I think the argument that you made, Ross, is actually a very compelling argument. It's an interesting argument to talk about. It is whether or not the philosophical reasons for owning guns outweigh the negative reasons that you will compound by having so many guns in a country like the United States, right? And I think when we ask ourselves that question, it is important to go one step deeper and ask, what is the purpose of owning guns? Many people will say stuff like feeling safe, or having the ability to defend themselves against the government, or having the ability to sort of topple a tyrannical regime or something like that.
You make it sound like it's a joke when you say it like that.
No, I don't even necessarily disagree with any of that. I'm sorry if you think that through my tone. I'm just saying it is important to recognize specifically the trade-offs that having as many guns as there are in the United States in a country are, and then recognizing whether or not you're willing to make those trade-offs for the, I guess, boons that are. But if you want to talk about the boons of having guns, you have to also specify specifically what it is you're looking for. Because
whether you're willing to make the trade-off.
Yeah, like in general, as a society, willing to make the trade-offs, not like you personally. But like the issue that I have with guns in the U.S. right now is that it feels like it has the worst of both worlds, right? If you're super pro-gun, like the United States has so many restrictions, and like in some places, so many bad outcomes in the United States based on like cultural issues, based on like issues with the police, like all these things that even like even if you're super pro-gun, the United States isn't necessarily like the best place. But if you're anti-gun, the United States is also horrible. So it's like currently in like a middle flux ground where nobody actually gets like the benefits of their side. And that's I don't know, that's kind of my issue.
Yeah, I think like the founding of America was very much value based, like based on, like I said, individual liberties, personal freedom, et cetera, and our laws have been egalitarian or utilitarian based, which those two things don't match. Like you said, it's the worst of both worlds, because all of these minor infringements on our values are only taking us marginally toward a quote unquote utilitarian utopia, which is never going to happen. So in both areas, no one's kind of winning.
I mean, it could, but the issue is that in the middle ground, you're sort of losing on both sides.
Ross, are you a constitutionalist? Like, do you like the Constitution, and that's how you think everything should be? Like,
well,
I'm a little confused by your.
No, I think that the Constitution is important. I think like having a shared history and shared values as a country is a good way to like have a ship go forward in a certain direction. I like the Constitution, but if as a country everyone said, this was written 250 years ago, we should start over with something new, something better, something 21st century. I would be open to hearing that.
Why start over? Why like have a revolution? It was pretty clear, like, slavery was bad, so we did an amendment. We thought getting rid of alcohol would be good. Then everyone decided, hey, I'd rather get fucked up, and we changed that shit again. So why can't we just look at the amendment as like really good legislation, really old? It's done pretty good job, but maybe it needs some edits. Personally, again, I'm a patriot. I want the United States to be as best as possible, and I'm not going to be fucking hung up on centuries old document that is just not working for this day and age.
You mean specifically the Second Amendment? I mean, so
yeah, we're talking about guns. Yeah, but we could talk about the Constitution in general too.
So First and Second Amendment is, as far as I'm concerned, are just totally untouchable in terms of
Second Amendment, not first. Second, we're just talking about the second.
Oh, okay, second. Just totally untouchable in terms of infringing on an individual who has sovereignty and free will.
Wait, why? Why?
Because it protects it protects all the things that Dario mentioned. Self-defense. It protects tyrannical government. If the government does something that I am willing to die for, I can die for it. I mean, for many reasons.
Gotcha.
Are you willing to sacrifice other people's lives for this freedom, though?
Wait,
I'm not sacrificing other people's lives.
One piece of logic, because it's important, right? It's talking about the idea of the necessity of a militia in this country, right? And I believe strongly in that as well. We can have armories, right? There's lots of ways to go about having a stable and a stronger militia than we have now. Even the most far right nut jobs, right? Like far right than any of you guys here. Trust me when I'm talking about far right. Super far right people, love the idea of militias. And far left people also happen to like militias. So I don't think anybody, maybe even some moderates might be our worst enemies here, care about not having militias. So we can still have that. We can uphold the value of the Second Amendment and still take an honest look at gun problems in the country, which also have bipartisan potential.
Yeah, I think militias is a good idea, but I mean, I wouldn't want to
occurred.
Like that's asking people to not have a gun in their house and to protect themselves when someone breaks in, or to protect their store or something like that.
Yeah, the age of the document is irrelevant. It's the efficacy of the idea. It doesn't matter. It's like, well, it's 200 years old. Well, who cares? That doesn't mean anything.
It kind of matters.
Magna Carta is pretty old too.
I mean, the idea that we're not supposed to murder people is thousands and thousands of years old. We're not throwing that out. Sorry, that one sticks around.
What does the First Amendment say about smartphones and the internet? What is
it doesn't say anything about smartphones. It talks about
more like the Fourth Amendment if you want to talk about phones.
So yeah,
right.
The right to speak.
Sure. So technology evolved to a certain point where the legislation doesn't quite match up with the present day. That's how age can matter. So for example, right now we have weapons much stronger than weapons that were around back when the Second Amendment was a thing. So, for example, they didn't predict drone strikes. There was nothing about drone strikes in that material. So this is how age can matter, as just one tiny example. So it's not that age can be dismissed. It's not because it's old, therefore bad. Because it's old, it's probably missing a few things that don't line up with how modern society is.
We update it, but it's the principles. It's the idea of
I'm good with that. Yeah,
a gun. It's the idea of being able to speak.
Amendments are
Like, well, the tools change, right? And it's like, okay, the tools change, but the fundamentals don't change.
I mean, if you look at, I mean, unless you're going to say that the Supreme Court has ruled like unjustly, or like their interpretation is wrong or whatever. I mean, the Constitution allows for us to, or gives like the federal government the ability to curtail like the private ownership of guns, right? Like the Supreme Court has interpreted the Second Amendment to mean that, like, yeah, we can put laws in place that prevent people from owning firearms. Like, yeah, that is perfectly within the purview constitutionally of the federal government. So this idea that, like, oh, well, you know, personal liberties and, oh, we used to be founded on principles and blah, blah, blah. This really doesn't hold up. We're still adhering to these principles. I guess you just disagree with like the Supreme Court's interpretation of these.
You'd have to be citing something specific for me to answer that. What do you mean? You're just saying the Supreme Court has ruled something. You disagree with the Supreme Court? Like, which one? What's the ruling?
I mean, I don't know the specific cases. I can go ahead and look into like case studies that have like or like cases that have been brought to the Supreme Court where they've ruled on these issues. But yeah, I mean, like this is like the precedent that's currently set for what is or is not constitutional in the United States.
To answer the question broadly, sure. Since I don't have an example, I can't tell you exactly what my answer would be, but I'm sure there's probably rulings that the Supreme Court has made that I think are probably wrong. I don't know which ones they are, and I don't know if we're talking about ones, you know, that specifically speak to guns, but I'm sure there's probably all throughout history things that the Supreme Court has ruled that have been then revoked or reviewed. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I would just argue that, like, it seems like the decision on firearms seems to be in line with like the will of the people. So like to propose like that, like the Supreme Court should have ruled differently seems to go counter towards, I guess, the will of the people. I don't know. You would have to make that like argument and like bring that case forward to like set that sort of constitutional precedent, right? If you want to argue from a constitutional standpoint, that's the burden's on you then.
We'd have to have something specific that we were referencing to discuss. Like if you're just saying like, the Supreme Court has made a ruling. Do you disagree with the Supreme Court? Oh, well, that's too broad.
I'm not necessarily talking about a ruling, though. I think you're getting like caught up in that. I'm talking about like the current like constitutional precedent that is set by these institutions as recognized by
firearms.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. There are firearms that I think can and should be restricted. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that should be within the purview of the federal government. It's also within the purview of the federal government to say that, hey, we should account for a number of different factors before allowing people to even own a firearm. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable and perfectly constitutional.
Well, we're getting ahead. That's the third question, is about legislation.
Well, I mean, we don't really need topics here, do we?
Do we? I mean, I try to stay focused, but I mean, I guess.
You know what, everybody? It's about to be 9, so we've already done an hour on this, so we can move on to the next one.
Dylan's just been like scrolling through Twitter this whole time.
What other polls are you in, Dylan?
I am only in one poll, and I'm getting smashed because Vosh hates the little guy and he's a fake socialist. Okay, so number 2, what weapons, if any, should people be not allowed to buy? I'm going to start with Ross.
Yeah, this one's kind of tough. I mean, there's an argument that weapons that cause mass collateral damage should not be allowed for the general public. But in most cases, I think anything is free game. So criminals don't fight fair. So you can't really expect to ban something and a criminal not use it. Firearms equalize the situation for law-abiding citizens and the disadvantaged. And I mean, it just I know MindWaves brought up the fact that it's not it is constitutional to ban certain weapons, but the idea is that the citizenship can fight against a tyrannical government or can fight against a government that isn't representing them. So if the government is the one taking away those rights or taking away the right to own certain firearms, and they can have them, that seems totally totally unconstitutional or totally backwards.
Okay.
By what interpretation of the
Mind waves,
Constitution?
come on. No one else do this again.
Oh, sorry. All right.
This question too.
That's the only reason I'm not on S tier, and I know it. A scuffed area.
You should have gave us a moment to like wrap up the last topic. I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. I should have given people a moment to wrap up the last topic. You know what, Mindwaves? You're correct. The only time I've ever seen it, but you are correct. So if everybody wants to, Ross is the special person who's already gotten his
Can
first
do that at the
statement.
same time, can't we?
Yeah, okay, sure. If you want to wrap up the
right
next topic and then stay on the next one. So next is scuffed area.
Sure. You know what? I'll just move on to the next topic. Everybody else can wrap up or whatever. In terms of like what guns should be owned or not, again, I would revert to the philosophical question, right? Like, what is the purpose of owning guns? I think if the purpose
Putting holes in things at distance.
if the purpose of owning guns is to protect yourself from a tyrannical government, then any limitation that that government puts on whatever weapons you can use is always going to be favored for them to not, I guess, be overthrown, right? I mean, it makes sense. Like, why would the government give you guns that could help you overturn them? When that's being said, we can look at like big cross-sectional analysis of like different studies and of different countries who've implemented different laws, and it seems like there is a common denominator that says banning big guns or like automatic rifles, stuff like that, has a very big effect.
What are big guns?
Reducing the amount of gun deaths that happen in countries. So, for example, this happened in South Africa, where they implemented this among a few other things, and they successfully reduced gun violence by 13% every single year for like 5 years in a row. So yeah.
What are big guns though?
What?
Like
Let's
automatic
wait.
rifles.
We say that for the OnlyFans.
Yeah,
All right.
let's wait. We gotta wait. Last
These are
username.
big guns.
Okay, last username.
Okay, it seems to me that these debates often end up kind of stuck. I mean, it seems like the people here, we don't have anyone who's saying they ban guns entirely, and we don't have anyone who's saying all weapons should be legal, even like personal nukes.
Oh, I'd say that.
So everyone is willing to everyone thinks that we need some sort of compromise, right? We need guns are okay, but we need some sort of regulation. There's have to be some limits on them, and so it's just a matter of figuring out what those limits are, which is the difficult question. And I think that's why that's the question that often gets sort of ignored in favor of these like more philosophical. Well, philosophy is okay, but what are you doing? In favor of just bickering about the Constitution and stuff. So I really want to focus on that. Like, what are the good regulations that the gun people would be okay with, that would work? And let's talk about that so we don't end up with the bad regulations that the gun people don't like, but they get passed anyway because they're not willing to discuss any regulations, right? I think that's the kind of discussion we want to have. There we go.
Okay, BrentoBox.
Guns that, well, like I was saying, I'm not much of a gun expert. I don't really have too much of a take on it. I have thought about, I've thought of the concept of like basically like MindWaves and like others were saying, I think it was MindWaves were saying like, you know, a class or something like that, a training course. And I think that would be, I don't think that's too out of scope, that I think like you could require something like that, you know, as long as it did not infringe on anyone's right, essentially to
enforce. I'm sorry.
No, I know, but then, you know, it creates a limit and it creates an enforcement, and then it makes it so that you basically can start infringing on it as time goes on, and that to me is like a serious problem.
Okay. I know people in chat have been asking like, what do I know about guns? I know a lot about guns. Okay, I'm a proud gun owner. I just want everybody in chat to know that. Okay, see,
You're a hippie. You automatically don't know anything about guns.
okay, look, okay, well, look, if I want everybody to stop shooting each other, I gotta know how the trigger works, right? Anyway, frames.
You would think, but
Okay, frames. You're next.
Frames, you
That's an enlightened take, frames. I also agree.
Are we just talking about like closing statements on the last topic?
Yeah, closing statements, and then you go into the new question. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I pretty much said all I had to say about it. It's just a dumb argument to have if you're fighting for guns. I don't know. I think you can do better things than that. And I guess the next one's like what weapons?
Yeah,
I feel like it's set up pretty good how we have it now. Some could argue about, assault rifles or ARs. I know it's going to trigger people calling them assault rifles, but that's how the government has them classified in the bill they're trying to pass. But ultimately, I wouldn't, because they don't really account for that much of the gun deaths more than handguns, and I don't see getting rid of those either. So, kind of like the way it is now.
Okay. Next is Grumple Silkskin.
Y'all know what this is?
It's a gun.
A hammer.
It's a big
Oh,
weapon.
second answer was correct. Yeah, this is a tool.
Nice meme.
Oh, I was say, don't talk about yourself like that.
Okay. I know. Well, that was funny. Okay, everybody.
It's just a different kind of tool. This is like
tool
my
that kills.
my truck
A
gun.
tool that's
Okay,
like built
everybody.
and like made to kill.
Let's all be quiet.
It's intended to put holes in things at distance, just because you're not close enough to put the hole in the thing. Mind waves.
Okay. Next is Dary.
Oh, it's a whole.
You wait for that.
Jesus Christ,
You
that was
made me
wild.
wait.
Yeah. Wait, that's how this works. Mind waves. Okay.
This might be my most
How
like
it works.
Okay, Dary.
out of the questions that were listed. This is probably my most contentious one out of all of them.
True.
Is just that the fantasy of being the good guy, being the hero, is ingrained in the culture. The statistics bear out that people that try to even attempt to defend themselves with guns are statistically higher to make more harm. There's no statistic to say being a good guy with a gun is the way to go. The question itself seems to be skewed in a really weird way that seems to be like circular in logic and past the point and past the real discussions, the good discussions. And I would rather talk about how to stop the gun deaths than what to do when we're in like, a gunfight, a firefight.
And lastly is Mind Waves.
Oh boy. So I think this argument about like what arms should we allow the people to own is I know a lot of Democrats, a lot of people on the left want to ban the big scary spooky assault rifles and stuff like that. But if you actually look at like gun violence in the United States, the majority of it's done with handguns. The same is true about like this is true of suicide. This is true of murders, etc. Right? The majority of it is handguns. So I think that focusing on semi-automatic rifles and stuff like that is probably not the most productive way to go about reducing harm when it comes to firearms. I don't really have an issue with the types of guns that people have access to. I'm not even interested in limiting like clip size or anything like that. I'm just more interested in having people be able to own firearms, any firearm that is currently available on the market. And honestly, within reasonable means, as long as they're able to prove themselves, healthy enough, capable enough, etc. I think that's totally fine.
Okay, that's everybody's closing and opening statements for the new topic. You can engage with other people freely.
So yeah, the only thing I want to add real quick, is that when we talk about assault rifles, as many crimes aren't committed with them, but they still have a fairly high body count, right? Like even in mass shootings.
Not really.
Yeah, really. Hold on. Let me finish. Even in mass shootings, holy fuck. Let me finish 1 second. In mass shootings, more mass shootings have been done with pistols, but assault rifles still have a higher body count in mass shootings since 2004.
I don't think assault rifles have done hardly nothing. As far as assault rifle is a word that has a definition, and it involves being automatic.
Okay, we get that, but the U.S. government has made that. Let me finish. The U.S. government has a list of guns that are assault rifles, and ARs are on that list. So just for the sake, yes, it is. I'll pull it up. I'll send it to you. The reason why I'm saying this is for the sake of the argument, we'll refer to it as that. That way we know what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah, assault
okay?
rifles involving
What would you rather me
medium
call him,
cartridge,
Grumple?
shoulder
Give me another
fire,
word to call him.
gas operated.
Oh no, the fucking
Capable
DD.
Dylan,
of
do your
select
job. Holy
fire.
shit! If Grumple was me, you'd mute him. You would have muted him like an hour ago. Come on, dude.
I was waiting for one more. Come on, I was waiting for one more.
Okay.
Dylan, just mute MindWaves. What the?
Good point. Dary, you're the moderator. Okay.
All right, let me
I'm
just
curious.
go-
MindWaves. What is your reason? Like, what is your primary reason for wanting to have guns in circulation, like in society? Is it for self-defense?
Why do I think that people should be able to own firearms?
Yeah. Is it for self-defense? Is it for safety? Is it for be able to uprise against the government? Like, what's the reason?
Good question.
I think all of those are valid reasons. Yeah, I would say that like the potential, as much as like I think that the talking point is cringe, and a lot of the arguments that like the LARPy right makes over like using firearms for like a tyrannical government, etc. Like as much as I don't like those arguments that they make, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think that having an armed society, as long as we're able to reduce the amount of harm done by having an armed society or preventing people that shouldn't have firearms, etc., right? I think that allowing people to own firearms privately is good in the event that they, need to arm themselves against any sort of, force, I guess, whether it be their own government or external, etc.
Do you think that realistically that right now the United States people could defend themselves against the government, or like the people in a state or like in a city?
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever?
I actually do. I actually do think that I didn't always used to think this. Like people make the argument, oh, like you think you can like fight against drone strikes, blah 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 blah. But I genuinely believe that given how much, like given the size of the U.S. population, how much guns, how much we're already armed, etc. I don't know. I think that people really undersell like guerrilla war sort of like tactics and stuff like that.
And then you got assholes like
Black and
me
white
that
thing, right?
are instructors and then will train all of the other people if whatever happens.
Like,
Well,
regardless of
I'm
what you
not trying to make it happen.
regardless of what you think the outcome, no foreign government or the U.S. government or anyone would ever try and take any action in the United States without considering like the massively armed population. Like you say, well,
And we live in a climax, right? We live in a climate right now where if any of this sort of thing happened, if any of this sort of like authoritarian, tyrannical government, like oppressing its own sort of like population shit started to happen within the United States, I really do believe like an international like intervention would happen right now, right? Like, there's no incentive for the United States to even engage in that behavior. But yeah,
sure.
I don't agree with
Can I just address the two arguments there? So the
Yeah.
first argument was that right now the people would be able to defend themselves against the government. I think if you consider that the vast majority, let's say like maybe 90% of the people, maybe they would have some sort of chance. I think the way that currently it works is for every year that passes, military strategy, like robots, like drones, like all these things get more and more evolved to the point where like simple guns like don't do anything anymore.
But then you got people that get out after they have the training. The people that get out that know how to deal with that stuff.
Sure. So considering that, and the second argument that you made in terms of like international whatever support coming in for the US, I think right now if you look at like other places in the world, we aren't like acting internationally, even though China literally has like fucking concentration camps on Muslims. Like North Korea is literally enslaving their own people. I mean, we're not
sure, but there's like a number of
mobilizing
different like
international-
dynamics at play there, right? Like they don't see those people as like they're basically second class citizens in their government, right? But if the United States started like literally gunning down its own citizens in mass, like a full fledged
Sure, but there's like the US would just declare them not citizens anymore or something like that, right? I mean, do you really think that fucking China would come and help the US or like the people?
Do you think people in the army would fire upon their own citizens?
Yeah,
I mean, what you're saying is
Mexico
like we
and
pretty much
Canada
sacrifice
definitely
the
would not be
individual to governments.
This is a good question for me and Grump, actually, then. Answer that question. Grump, you hated the MPs, right?
Say again?
You hated the MPs, right? In the Marine Corps, you hated the MPs?
Oh, yeah. Nobody likes MPs. Nobody likes MPs.
They're the police, and the Marines fucking hated the police. We always hated the police. So if if it came to like the American people or the government, like there's a lot. The military isn't like as gung ho for the government, especially against the people, as you might think. That's an important facet. Of,
Yeah, true.
No, I'd never. No, it's in the friggin' oath. Hang on. Let me hang back to the oath. to where you're not gonna do ill. It's the moral obligation of every friggin' NCO to disobey illegal orders.
Yep.
It's an obligation.
Yeah, and firing upon American citizens is something.
That's a very illegal order.
We can look at even former Commandant Mad Dog Mattis, and he told Trump to fuck off a couple of times.
Saint Mattis. Oh man, I don't actually know what the whole thing was that he just did. I don't know. Dude, I've been working from home, so I haven't been listening to the radio, so I don't.
Yeah, you don't even have to agree with like the politics of that. Just know that like even people in high stations in the military will go against like a government attempt to like coup the people or some bullshit like that. So like it's not as like clear and dry.
Oh no, small and big units will totally just say no, fuck off.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. Yeah, because it's an obligation to do that.
Yeah. So the point that I made wasn't whether or not like that was realistic. It was whether or not if that happened, like if we said, okay, this is what happens now, could the U.S. like effectively defend itself?
No.
And B, could the U.S. citizens effectively defend themselves? A, and B, would international help come? And I think for both of those, the answer is no.
Because they're jerks like me that got out and are instructors.
You know, did the protesters in Hong Kong effectively defend themselves? I mean, I guess not, but
through
they definitely made a difference.
Yeah, but like through nonviolent means, right? They're not fighting the government. They're occupying space.
They probably would have done an even better job, maybe even.
Well, no, not necessarily. They might have just been gutting shot instead. Like the reason why the Hong Kongers are doing so. Sure, the reason why the Hong Kongers are doing so good in their protests is specifically because they're not fighting back. Like whenever an occupying force comes in, they regroup and then they take another area instead.
I mean, it seems to me the reason they're doing well is because they're organized.
Well, yeah.
And because they're getting a lot of attention internationally. Which is kind of, all they can really do with China since they don't have a lot of, government accountability through democracy.
Yeah.
America has a lot more government accountability, and an armed populace doesn't have to actually vanquish the government in order to make a difference. All they have to do is make it politically difficult to oppress them, more difficult. And it seems to me having guns definitely does that. I mean, the government's got to do a lot, got to make a much worse optics in order to oppress citizens with guns than without.
Sure. But when you're talking about optics, like there's already concentration camps within the United States. Like there's already concentration camps in China. Mm-hmm. Like we're not doing like international. Yeah, they got a lot of flack, but like stuff isn't happening. Like they're not closing down the concentration camps right now because of the flack. I mean, there's been flack for like years.
If the current president gets booted out, I mean,
maybe
we got a lot of negative attention for that.
Sure, maybe. I mean, it could be, but like nobody is rushing in to the United States to fucking close the border camps.
You mean
like Mexico isn't going in
because they're not U.S. citizens.
But it's not. You don't even need other countries. I mean, America has has a way of holding the government accountable. Like the people ultimately have the power over the government. It's just a matter of the mechanism that they do that, and can they organize in the right way to use that mechanism, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree inherently that the people do have power
over the
government.
So if the U.S. government has to go and start shooting their own citizens, that's going to piss off a lot of citizens. It's going to be seen by the whole country. And that's going to reduce the opinion of the government and motivate them to organize to do whatever they need to do to stop the government.
Sure. So, I mean, if you want to go into like realistic scenarios, how this would happen, usually the way that it would happen is that you would have some sort of demographic that would be on board with what the government was doing, right? Like it's very unlikely that like 1% of the population just wants to fucking nuke everyone else. It's usually like a sizable portion, maybe even like majority of the population. right? And they want to oppress the rest. So it's never going to be a full force like the United States is combined against the government. It's always going to be like a minority of the United States citizens against like a majority combined with the military force of the government.
Right, and the military would have to agree with whatever the movement is.
So here's the realistic scenario. So here's my 2 reasons of why guns should be allowed. It's a luxury item. It's fucking fun. That's number 1. Number 2, militias. And so here is a realistic scenario where militias actually do a thing, right? Black Panther Party, cop watching was a big deal. They were doing patrols to keep the racist cops in line, and the fact that they were armed made the whole Mulford Act by at the time Governor Reagan, and they were literally a militia, and the militia kept that authoritarian factor in check, and that's a example of where militias realistically would have an effect.
Derry, do you think
we're not going to be in war? We're not going to be in war. That's not going to happen against each other. But on small grounds like that, it does matter.
Derry, you mentioned militias quite a few times. Do you think that militias should have a local armory should have the same firepower as the U.S. military?
Probably not, because we're at that point we're looking at budgets that are just probably outside of the norm. Now, if you're saying like, should they have like tanks and shit? We're at a level of warfare versus a level of just not being a meek, defenseless public. So like police force or small arms, for example, police against Black Panther Party, that kind of dichotomy, that kind of behavior between those 2 forces, having rifles in the arms of those men had an effect. And that's the kind of level of power that an armory would theoretically have to have. The details of which might get hairy, like, okay, do we have like the PEC 5 attachment and this bullshit M4s? But the idea of the militia is still present in that scenario.
Okay, but you would say that there is a restriction on what a what a militia can have in their armory?
Yeah, not at like warfare, because we can't wage war. What we can do is we can protect local areas and we can work on our communities and militia help communities. But we're not having a full scale war. That's just, again, that's unrealistic. I feel like we took that off the table, unless we want to talk about like some theory for the fun. But in a realistic scenario, we're not waging war against each other. That's not going to happen.
Well, so then why
the United States never waged war?
Why can't a militia own a tank then?
Sorry. Scuffed, that was a good meme. What did you say, Ross?
Why can't a militia own a tank?
I mean, how realistic are we talking?
Why shouldn't? I'm sorry.
I mean, like, is there some like millionaire in like a town that's like, you know what, I'm gonna fucking drop my.
Yeah, Bezos wants one, or Bill Gates wants one.
I mean, realistically, if there's probably would have to be a bit of extra regulation on that kind of thing. I mean, I don't think that we should just like do afternoon. Just like tanks blowing shit up. Like it'd have to be like specific areas. You can bring the tank to like test it out. Maybe parades, right? As long as like the tank isn't fucking armed, it's just like, hey, look, we're a militia, we're a tank. Like, but it has to be like so many more. There has to be like a reasonable regulation on fucking tanks.
So it sounds like you're more interested in like community defense rather than individual defense. Is that where you're coming from?
Absolutely, yeah. Self-defense has statistically bore out to cause more harm to the people trying to defend themselves. Statistically, again, it does happen. Good guys with guns do exist. It does happen, but statistically, it's not for me. It just doesn't seem to look good.
True. I'm curious, why are we banning tanks if the purpose is to defend the community against like an oppressive force?
I don't think we're going to be tank on tank warfare. That's as simple as that gets. I don't think there's going to be a point.
If the military has tanks, shouldn't the people have tanks?
Well, I'm saying that there isn't, at the point we're talking about military, we're talking about warfare, and I don't think we're going to get to that point. Well,
I don't think the point of arming like the people is to have them ready to like for full on civil war or like full on like war against like the government, right? Like we're talking about being able to like fight back against an oppressive force, even within just like a community, like not necessarily at like the national level, right? Yeah. And I do just want to bring it back because I think that we're getting a little bit caught on like this sort of like revolutionary sort of like taking up arms with your comrades sort of meme. And I think that this is like one of the weakest defenses for firearm ownership in the United States. freemz actually, because what the conversation is supposed to be about, like what types of guns should we have. freemz just linked a study, and I see this talking point a lot. Well, I don't know if you're going to make it, freemz, but this talking point that like, oh well, if we look at all the deadliest shootings, if we look at all the most like all the mass shootings and which ones were the deadliest, it seems to be the case that semi-automatic rifles are used in those shootings, and that's why they're the most deadly. The thing is that I think that tackling this issue this way by banning semi-automatic rifles kind of ignores the actual problem, and is the fact that the people that committed these acts had access to firearms in the first place, right? It doesn't matter what type of firearm they had access to or how deadly the shooting was going to be once they had it. If they never had that firearm, there would have been no shooting, right?
You're kicking the can down the road, though, MindWaves. Like, I'm sorry, what?
I was just to clear up my point a little bit too. I don't think that we should ban assault rifles. I'm just saying I push back against the idea that they're not more deadly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they definitely are, and I agree with that sentiment. I just want to make sure that like we're not. I think that Democrats use a lot of they kind of put forward this like AR ban or like semi-automatic rifle ban to kind of like placate the general public and make them feel like they're doing something to tackle the issue of guns, when in reality they're not even they're not even bringing attention to the real issue, which is the fact that, you know, how you obtain a firearm, how it is determined that you are capable and able to own a firearm responsibly. That is the real issue.
But don't you feel like you're kicking the can down the road? I mean, so if it's the case that 35 years ago we didn't have this problem of mass shootings and gun crime, we did in terms of gun crime to an extent, but if you take away guns, then you're stuck with a bunch of American men who are depressed or on drugs, and they just don't have a gun to work with. So I'd much rather fix some underlying issues in America, which are causing people to either go crazy and kill a bunch of people, rather than just take away the gun.
So you're basically presenting or putting forward the argument that like, oh, this isn't a gun problem, this is a mental health problem, right? I just want to make sure that's the point you're making.
So what I mean by kicking the can down the road, so let's say all guns are gone. We still have this problem that a bunch of people are depressed, a bunch of people are on drugs, a bunch of people, if they would have had a gun, they would have thought that it was okay to kill a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just want to be very clear that, like, just like I said earlier, there are several compounding factors that like work to exacerbate the problem of gun ownership in the United States or gun violence in the United States. And I don't think that we shouldn't be addressing those issues, those other compounding issues, right? I think that what you're pointing to, like the fact that America specifically seems to have a really bad problem with mental health, and this sort of culture that seems to raise these like people that think these mass shootings are something that they want to do, etc. Like I agree that this is a problem, but I think that we can tackle both of those issues, right? It's not one or the other. We can both tackle the issue of how people obtain firearms and also tackle the issue of mental illness, etc.
I'm just reading off of a study here. It says there's this study which roughly examines 130, like it's a meta study of like 130 studies that have been conducted in 10 different countries. Each of those had looked at some specific changes in gun laws and the effect on homicide and suicide rates. And that study showed that the combination of these three policies had by far the best effect in reducing the amount of suicides and homicides by guns, like this meta study. And those three are: number one, banning powerful weapons like automatic rifles; number two, implementing a background check
automatic
system.
Do you mean semi-automatic or full automatic, or what?
It
It
just says automatic. I don't know. I can look deeper into it if you want. Number two, implementing a background check system. Number three, requiring people to get permits and licenses before buying a gun. So the combination of these three is what makes a huge adverse effect in reducing the amount of gun homicides and suicides, based on like a meta study of like 130 studies. So I think it's foolish to say that, oh, well, who cares about what kind of guns people use? I mean, surely the data from like all around the world, the US as well, included in these stats, should at least give some credence to the argument.
No, so I'm totally with you there. But like I said, I know you kind of talk about this a lot, Dario, but people don't really live their lives based on data analytics. They live their lives on narratives. And the narrative of the United States is that the Second Amendment is kind of ingrained in the soul of our country. So it's
100%.
Like it kind of, I don't want to say that it falls on deaf ears, that we can reduce gun deaths by this or that. I just think that there's something, I don't like using this language, but there's something wrong with the soul of our country where people think it's okay. Like, forget about if we have guns or not. People think that it's okay to go out and kill.
I actually empathize a lot with your position, and I understand the way that people in general understand these issues or like want to address these issues. And I completely agree that like from a framing or like from a talking about a perspective, you're completely correct in like talking about the underlying issues that are a lot of the fault of like why the problem is so exasperated in the United States. However,
there's
I
a
would
storm
say that
rolling in. I have to go move some things inside so
shit.
that it doesn't get rained on. I'll be back in just a moment.
No problem.
Sorry.
All right. Yeah, so when we're talking specifically, like we're on a panel show, right? We're all adults here. We're all done our research. We've all thought about these arguments before we talked with different people. When we talk about these issues, we have to talk about studies and policy because these are issues that affect millions of people. So we cannot just say, well, how do we convince like singular people? We have to talk about what is the most effective ways to proceed. And generally, the way that you decide that is by looking at studies and comparing like what other people have done or like other countries in similar situations. That is how you proceed.
Hold on, let me push back. I can push back against all three of them that just at that point. So I don't think there's a dichotomy of a situation exactly where we have to have less guns to deal with gun violence. Exactly. So what I mean by that is we can still have guns. It can still be like the soul of the country to have guns. And we can still work on the problem. And the problem is, I don't think anyone disagrees, the problem is people dying by guns. So we can address that problem, and we don't have to get rid of the guns. This isn't a situation.
reducing the amount of guns is going to reduce the amount of gun deaths.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? Like banning, yeah.
Sure, but that's like meaningless, right? Because like that's like saying, well, if we just take all the guns away, then there's no gun crime. Well, yeah, of course, right? But like that's is like I don't know.
Yeah,
that's not like
it's reduction.
No, so here's the thing.
Why is that not? Wait, can you continue that thought, MindWaves? Like, was there an argument?
Well, yeah, I just don't think it's productive because, like, you said that, like, we should be talking about policy proposals and meaningful, like, steps towards, reducing gun deaths. And I don't think that saying, like, oh, well, we should just, like, take guns away is, like, a really good, policy proposal.
Sure. So in terms of, like, a policy proposal, how to actually make this a reality, that's obviously complicated. A lot of different things have been tried in different countries. For example, Australia has a very famous gun buyback program, which very heavily reduced the amount of guns and the amount of gun crime happening in the country to a point now where it's almost like negligible.
Mm-hmm. I would just, it's hard to compare Australia to America though too. Like, and I can't say for sure, but the gun culture is even different.
Sure. I mean, obviously it would be like a multiple faceted approach. I mean, right now, just looking at the pure numbers right now, there is more guns in America than there are people.
When I go over policy, I tend to like lean more towards accountability laws. I do think guns should be registered to the person who owns them. I think that just like a car, you should have a license to be able to have one and to use one. I think that
bullshit.
In order to make Grumple like mid-sentence every fucking time. Jesus Christ, like clockwork.
And he's not even at his computer.
I'm so glad he's contributed so much to this panel.
I don't think I've said
he cracks me up. Dude, I'm having so much fun.
Popping in 2 words in the middle, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I'm kind of stoned, and like it's so hard to like hit those 2 words and then have to like rethink what I was trying to get across. And thanks, Grumple. You're a real help, pal. The last thing I wanted to say was we talk about like people having to lock up their guns. I feel like if you're having a problem with your guns getting stolen or something like that, there should be some accountability. You should know where your guns are. I'm not saying that you should go to jail if someone commits a crime with your gun, but this would stop people from, this like parking lot loophole stuff or selling guns and people being able to buy a gun, which right now would be legal. to make that illegal for the person to sell it.
That's interesting you go with that, because that's actually one of the most bipartisan legislation policies put forward, is to hold people that sell guns illegally accountable for the crimes that person commits.
What's the support?
Roughly 90%.
No,
Yeah.
I was just curious. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing that holds it back are gun lobbyists.
Yep. Honestly, there's so many good bipartisan fucking policies out there, because it doesn't seem like any of us really hate guns in this room, and that's not a coincidence. Guns, there's a good way to go about doing it. There's bipartisan, people on the right, people on the left, extreme right, extreme left. There's a lot of shit we can agree on, and it's just frustrating how unnecessary it is to have this much gun death in this country. When there's so much policy on the
only
table.
thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good policy about guns.
There you go. That's a good. You should have said that at the end of the fucking first question, Dario. You got to be faster on this shit.
Yeah. Listen, it took me 30 minutes to come up with that one. Okay,
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Fuck it. For me, it just comes back to like, what is the purpose of like having guns, right? I mean, if the purpose is just self-defense, I mean, there could be an argument for like, do you need more than a handgun? I mean, like personal self-defense or whatever. If the argument is like being able to rise up or like brandish something which makes you more of a threat.
Oh,
I mean, then
no,
you can argue.
Dario, this is a very deep topic. If you want to get into it, we can talk about
Oh
He's
god,
getting
you're
into
gonna
it.
make me kill myself on Minecraft, I swear to God.
No, but
I
like
love you,
Grumple, Grumple, I'm sure you would agree that like somebody with a fucking big ass fucking gun like looks more threatening than somebody with like a Glock or whatever, right?
Who cares what somebody looks like if that person is trying to defend his or herself?
No, but I mean, I care what somebody looks like when they're trying to make a point, like when they're doing a protest or whatever. Like if you show up.
Wait, hang on. Did we switch from self-defense to protest?
That's a very surface level
We
concern.
just changed it up.
Like, I mean, like,
No, I mean, there's different purposes of like
Did we just
having a
change it
gun,
up?
right?
Oh, no. Oh.
yeah,
I mean,
but the.
I thought we were on one topic, but we're on a different topic.
You're talking about like the intimidation factor of a large gun versus a small gun. Yeah, but that's not really like it's not really a major
That's a
concern.
minute point.
Well, no,
Yes.
I think it's actually I think it's a super important one. I think one of the most important things is sort of the First Amendment that the United States has, or like the right to like protest, and a meaningful protest is a meaningful protest gets more meaningful if you can sort of show that you're a threat of some kind, like showing up in front of like the city hall or whatever, or like the mayor's office with like fucking armed to the teeth and just like standing there in protest. I think that's like a very powerful message to send, which effectively means that the guns, the bigger the guns, the more your speech is amplified in that specific scenario.
Hang
Roll
on.
up with a tank and you get your way then.
Wait,
Huh.
Scuff Dario, can you define what a bigger gun is?
I don't know, bigger in size. The bigger, the more threatening.
Does that mean it's got a bigger, like a caliber, or that's
He's talking about the actual stuff.
physically bigger?
It's an optics thing, Grumple. Like if we're talking about optics, obviously it's just going to be the size of the gun.
A really
Like-
big gaping barrel.
Yeah, like this big.
And I agree with I know Grumple probably thinks it's a little silly. I do too. But I will say, Grumple, like a lot of people don't know about guns. So obviously, a more intimidating gun is going to scare people more. I
Yeah, a
get
lot
what
of
he's
people
saying.
don't, and they need to get more educated.
Yeah, we can
Sure,
talk
and we
about
should do that through legislation. We should require that they get more educated if they want to own a firearm, right? Like that would be a really great policy.
Let him finish his point.
Horrible. That's atrocious. MindWaves, that's a horrible
Grumple,
take.
let him finish his point.
My point was
Oh, I
finished.
thought he
Dylan,
did
Thanks.
finish. My bad.
Oh, you know what, MindWaves?
The one time you stepped
You
in,
know
dude,
what?
thanks.
You know what, Grumple?
You're doing
You know what,
great, dude.
MindWaves?
Don't worry, dude. You got this.
Okay, I love MindWaves. I love him. I just love him. I just need everybody. You know what? We're gonna be quiet for just 10 seconds, and we're just gonna sit in silence. Okay?
That's just me on this podcast. I mean, yeah.
MindWaves is muted for the next 5 minutes. Okay, so. Okay, go. Okay, I just needed that. I needed that for my own mental health. Okay?
Yeah, so a big problem, and I know Grumple is gonna like get on this shit real quick, is that the legislators writing policy don't know fuck all about guns and rifles any of that shit. It's
Also about tech.
Yeah, that's most people who
Firearms
debate
and
guns
tech.
too. I've
Yep,
noticed.
the
People
internet.
making
Oh
laws
my
don't
God.
know bullshit about things that they're fucking writing laws about.
Yep.
Firearms and tech,
Is occurred.
both.
Yeah.
Dude, what
I
do
didn't mean to
politicians actually know? What
expand
do
your
politicians
horizon there,
actually
you know?
know if we're serious about it? Like
All
politicians
they know
don't
is how to get
fucking-
elected. Nothing else.
Yeah, I feel like politicians tend to go with whatever group. Like, say if someone's doing like a super pro gun platform, they're going to listen to the NRA. Where if someone's trying to do an anti-gun platform, they're going to listen to like anti-gun activist or
The
I guess
NRA
activist or what.
Advocates for safety and training.
Oh bullshit! They're there to protect large gun companies, and that's it.
Yeah, this is the hard.
Can you cite something on that, Freemz?
Well, I mean,
Sorry,
it's
dude.
not like something. that
Freemz, I
brag
like
about,
you, but
people.
can like
Hold on,
I've
hold
never
on.
seen that ever.
Yeah, that's because it's not like the NRA goes around saying like, oh yeah, we're here. We don't care about anybody. We're just here
If
to.
there's an actual source that you
So
can
okay,
cite,
all right,
please
Grumple.
message me.
We just agreed that 91% of people agree on some of these common sense gun laws. The reason why they don't do it is because there's gun companies will sell less guns. That's why the NRA is against it.
Fewer guns.
I don't know if that's true, man.
Sorry.
Why do you think that? Why do you think the NRA is against it when 91% of America isn't?
Because I think that
Because the NRA is for training.
Grumple, I can't even hear what he's saying, dude. Chill.
I thought you were asking me. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just saying there are people that are anti-gun in America that would think we've all talked to, even on the platform, that would get rid of the Second Amendment, right? They don't think Americans should have guns,
Okay.
right? And the NRA basically is just like saying, no, it's a fight. As much as we could have common sense gun laws, it's more of a fight over the power to control guns.
So I'm not saying that the NRA, like their sole individual job is to, make money for gun companies. But I do think that I'm sorry. Let me clarify. It's not for them to profit, dude. That's not what I'm saying.
The organization is a nonprofit organization.
Let him finish.
Yeah. So, but the gun companies themselves are not nonprofits, right? So
No, but the NRA is, which is what we're talking about.
I give up. Holy
Hey,
shit.
Grumple, I need you to let him finish.
Come on, man.
I need you to let him finish.
I apologize.
Right.
Freemz,
So
please.
a reason why the NRA doesn't back up things like the gun laws that most people agree on is because that would in turn make less money for gun companies.
Most people.
Actually,
91% of America, more than 50%. So yeah, most people.
Oh, please, citation needed.
Holy fuck.
so
Yeah.
Wait, hold on, I got you. If you want to? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, go
I-
ahead.
I-
If you already have,
yeah.
you already have.
Oh,
go ahead.
I have there's a bunch of shit.
This is something that we all agreed on earlier.
Here we go. Here's some citations. So interestingly here, it also says that the NRA
Hang on.
only represents about 5% of gun owners in the United States, and
Yeah, that's probably
it
about
fiercely opposes like legislation that is trying to get passed through Congress, like universal background checks, and probably what Freemz is referring to as well. Even though I haven't seen that.
Universal background checks includes like.
You're muted.
Did something happen? Hello?
Wait.
I think we all got disconnected for a second.
MindWaves' rage just took over the stream and stopped Grumple from talking. That's what happened.
I think it was just your lack of engagement in the panel that you're running.
But MindWaves, every single time I bring you on my panel, I get the same bullshit. And the one time you request to come on my panel, I get the most bullshit. And then I try my best, and I get the same amount of bullshit.
Over here
Look,
reading tweets
okay.
about the UN. What do you mean?
Damn, the finished, cooked, done. You got Dylan burned just now.
I love Dylan. I hope he knows that.
But
Thanks for bringing us together, Dylan.
I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, keep talking.
There was a citation that you wanted, and one such
Yes.
example of how the NRA is doing harm is stonewalling the CDC to actually investigate into
Why is the Centers for Disease Control?
Suicide is not something that,
That's not a
for the
disease.
most part, suicide it's a symptom
Is it
of
a
something like
disease?
depression, and depression is considered.
But
disease.
Dari, you can just overcome depression, dude. Just, like,
Is that something?
just smoke a joint or something.
That depression, you can just stop it. I mean, there's a reason.
That's a stretch, though. Putting firearms on.
Nope. Because
Depression
think about it
suicide,
again.
so.
Let's go back to the statistic earlier. About 61%, almost 2/3 of the gun-related deaths are suicide. I believe.
Oh, we're back to okay. So 2/3. We're back to okay.
Yeah, so but why
that
does that
was
happen?
correct thing. Okay.
Right. But why does that happen?
Because men are better at doing it.
Okay. But
Men are better at men are better at suiciding than women.
The thing I want you to think about.
Sorry,
is why
not a
people-
misogynist, but it's a fact.
Holy
Gotcha.
fuck.
Okay, so the thing I want you to think about is why people are shooting themselves to death, right? That's the thing I want you to think about, because the thing that how do we learn more about it? How do we stop that? Well, one way we stop that is by researching why people do that. And CDC, among other institutions, are the first step into researching why this happens, because suicide is related to depression. Depression is just one of many, many, many things that the CDC does. And so the NRA knows that guns are related to this. So they stonewall it and cut the budget. There's other examples too. This is just one, and I can have a link on that if you'd like, but that's just one little example of how the NRA is kind of fucking the mass majority of what the American people want.
It's a tool, though.
Sure.
Well,
it's
right.
fine.
I think the argument would be that if guns were gone, let's say there's I don't know how many suicides by
there were
gun
no
happen a
guns
year, but
ever,
if
people
guns were
wouldn't make
gone,
them.
maybe you would cut those in half. I think Dary's thinking that
Sure,
if there were no guns, people wouldn't have the tool, and then they would just be depressed for a night and then
Right.
go to their next day.
Well,
No,
now
so-
you're assuming a whole lot that it's whoever that maybe wanted to off himself or herself was only going to be depressed for that one night. Ross?
Oh no!
a whole lot
So
there.
I'm not I'm not necessarily pro what Dary's saying. I'm just saying that targeting the suicide aspect.
Yeah.
There is, like, if you want to reduce the number of suicides by guns, you can have some legislation. I'm not for that, but it seems pretty obvious that would work.
Do we want to do that?
Do we want to reduce the amount of suicides in the country?
Sure,
Is that
but
what you're
not by compromising like our civil liberties.
No, hang on.
Right.
Oh, that's the thing. We don't have to. We don't have to
Hey,
compromise.
whoa, Zach Slater. Not reduce the suicides by firearms, but you're trying to reduce the suicides or reduce it by firearms.
So
Those
here's
are
the
two different
Sure.
things.
So here's a stat that talks about this. So what do we say? Like 45,000 Americans every year die by suicides or whatever. 250,000 people each year become suicide survivors. So trying to kill themselves but not succeeding.
Can you break that down by gender, just so we're all on the same page, real quick?
Mostly,
Holy shit.
it's not going to change the topic.
Yeah, go figure. Because generally it's men that use a firearm and women use pills. That's
Right.
like
Well, sure. For men, it's like 51%.
that's a fact.
So like
Well,
it's
that's because
slightly
guns
above
are
50.
manly, dude. Have you ever held one? Holy shit. Sorry.
You know what's manly? A fucking katana, dude.
I'm starting to roleplay Grumple. I can't
all right,
stand
so
it.
here's the thing: if you Grumple, if people had at work, if they had a button on their desk and they pushed that button that would kill themselves, do you think suicide would go up?
Probably about the same, honestly.
It would go up by about the same. What does that mean?
No, I said it would probably be about the same as it is right now, because
You don't think
people who wanna kill-
suicide would go up anymore if someone had instant access to kill themselves? Like instant access?
no, not at all.
I
Dude,
push it right now. Just for the
How?
conversation.
Yeah, that's so.
It definitely would.
Seriously, I'm on last usernames page. Dude, what the fuck?
This is the reason we have last username on.
No.
I mean,
not at all.
Best comment of tonight.
If you really
Some people
don't
can
think
suicide, some people can't. And
if you
like,
really don't think that
have
would make
the
it
ability-
go up, then like I just don't feel like I can have a conversation with you about this because I think that's
Yeah, so
ridiculous.
I don't think it would make it go up.
No, so Grumple.
Yeah.
45,000.
Dario.
Yeah, 45,000 Americans
Not
successfully kill themselves every year. Okay, 45,000 successfully kill themselves. A quarter of a million try and fail. Right? If you had a button that you could just press and you would instantly die.
I'm not trying to break it down by gender.
No, gender. Okay, yeah, okay. So broken down. So broken down by gender, it's 70%. 70% of
Oh,
males.
70% men shoot themselves. Okay.
Sure, yeah. So 70% of a quarter of a million people are male, and they try and kill themselves every year and fail. So if they had a button, they could click and just die. They wouldn't fail. So obviously, you would have a quarter of a million more people dying every year.
I bet $1 half of them wouldn't push it.
Yeah, but Grumble, that's not the point. The point is that if you make it,
I mean, if we're having just a conversation right now,
do something, then it happens more often. Period. That's it. That's just it. If you just gave people instant access to something, they could make snap decisions, and it would happen more often. That's
sounds like we're talking about the Futurama suicide booth right now.
Yes, we are. That is it. Exactly.
Yeah, that makes it easier for you to digest, I'm sure.
Guys, we need pictures and
the issue is Grumble, that these people literally tried to kill themselves. They tried to kill themselves but failed because they didn't take enough pills or whatever, or they missed.
And then many of them don't try
because they're failures.
Yeah. Whoa, okay, whoa.
Love you, meme waves.
Whoa, Grumple. We're not saying that on the stream, okay?
So the majority of people, the vast majority of people who try and kill themselves fail to do so, and that's a good thing, right? We want people
because they didn't really want to.
Sure, but in that moment they tried.
Sure.
But in that moment,
Dario,
they tried.
Grumble's saying that some people attempt, quote unquote, to commit suicide as a cry out, but they don't actually want to die.
Well,
there you go.
Do you have any data that supports this? Do you have any data that shows that people just do suicide attempts?
Okay.
Let's start with feelings. People shoot themselves in the head and then don't die. Is that like a failure?
No. I just want to hear if there's any data to support this claim.
Okay,
the claim was made.
I'm saying that there's a subset of people who attempt to make a cry out to.
What are you basing this
attention,
off of?
And then there's another subset that actually did try to kill themselves and it failed. Like they drank bleach.
What are
they
you basing
actually
this off
wanted
of?
to die.
I mean, even if that's true,
what are you basing this off of? Please, is it just anecdotal? Do you just know people that did this for attention in your opinion, or like what is this?
I do know people in MindWaves.
No, don't. I'm not interested in general understandings. Okay, don't appeal to common sense. Sorry, Ross, go ahead.
I'm trying to bridge the gap so that Grumple will agree with Dario. I don't know why you're jumping on me on this.
Okay, so why do you think that people commit suicide just for attention? Because you seem to insinuate that this is like a large group of people.
No,
that do
not
this.
at all. I'm just trying to convince Grumple that that subset of people who attempted but
what
did not die.
What are you basing this opinion off of? What made you think this?
History?
What do you mean?
No, okay. So basically,
nothing. Nothing. Literally nothing. People that commit suicide don't do it for attention. They do it because they have suicidal ideation. It's due to like a mental health problem.
Not people who commit suicide. People who attempt suicide sometimes do it for attention.
Yo, can we just stop talking about suicide?
What are you basing that off of?
Yo, can we just stop talking about suicide? I don't want to talk about suicide anymore. Can we move on?
Suicide's a huge fucking issue when it comes to guns. That's one of the biggest issues.
Okay.
MindWaves, I don't know why you're jumping on me. I'm trying to bridge the gap between what Dario and Grumple are talking
I'm jumping on you because you are implying that people commit suicide for attention, right? And that they're they're not actually trying to kill themselves, and that's why they weren't successful. But that's just not true. A lot of people aren't successful when they were legitimately trying to commit suicide and kill themselves.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
I think the host
what
has
I'm
said,
saying is that there are
nerds.
So
okay, yeah, we can move on, but MindWaves, maybe I can tell you what I mean later because you're jumping on me. And
no, I'd like you to tell me that now,
what I'm saying.
Because you made the claim and you're not supporting it with anything except for this is how I feel.
MindWaves, the host already said, let's move on.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck about the host. The host isn't even here. What do you mean?
The host is Dylan Burns.
I'll ping you something later, MindWaves, if you want to know.
I don't know. He's talking to his chat.
We're going to move on. I understand suicide is a big topic when it comes to gun control. I don't want to hear about it anymore. This conversation hasn't been productive. MindWaves leaving? Fine. Bye. Fuck you. We're done talking about suicide. I don't want to hear it. I don't like how the conversation about suicide has went generally. I know it's important. We're not talking about it anymore. Do you all understand? We're going to do one last topic. It's 1 more hour, and we're ending stream. I'm not happy. Everybody be productive from now on, because there's no longer mutes. You're getting kicked. I'm not happy. We're going on, okay? Okay.
Just FYI, Dylan, you muted all of us, so like unless they had your stream on, like we couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is what I said. I know. I said that we're moving on to the next topic. I understand suicide's a big topic when it comes to gun control. I think we've talked about it at length, and I don't think we've gotten anywhere on it. I don't really like how the discussion has gone around gun control. I also don't personally want to hear it anymore. So I'm asking for everybody's kindness to not really talk about that anymore. We're going to go on to the next topic. And if we do need to talk about suicide in the future, I know it might come up in the next discussion. We do it in the most respectful way possible. And I'm just not. I'm just generally. I understand. I'm just not happy right now. Okay. So we're moving on to the next topic.
That's fair.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
And from now on, it won't be mutes. It'll be kicks. And whoever is kicked will not be welcome back. Okay, cool.
All right, do we go around for next topic? Like
Yeah. Give me a second. I just.
Sure. No, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I'll
people
start.
should wait for the next topic at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next topic.
I got it.
Oh.
Let me.
Okay. Sure.
What gun control legislation, if any, are you in favor of? I'm gonna start with Ross Lewis.
All right, and let me just apologize. I did not mean to say anything in bad faith. I can follow up with someone else later. I'm sorry about that. So in terms of gun control legislation, I think that there's plenty that we have right now that could be removed. I get that there's a lot of bipartisan compromises that can be made, but I do really think that the Second Amendment is really important, and I think that we have this soul of our country that is being lost. And if things are changing in a different direction, I think that we need to address that. Background check shows what someone has done, not what they will do. There's it's a numbers argument, like stats, how many will commit something later rather than a values argument, which I know that doesn't land for a lot of people, but like I said, people live their lives based on narratives and values rather than just statistics. I know people do really value statistics though. But yeah, if someone could snap their fingers and somebody else would die, and this was just a power that humans had, we would have to contend with that. And I see guns as somehow having that power and something that we can't take away. So if humans had that power, we would need to build a society so that humans didn't want to use that power. So if we want to address gun control, then we would have to do it in a way where that people would not want to use guns against each other.
Okay, next is Dario.
Sure. Yeah. I would say it entirely depends on what the purpose is. Like, what do you want to achieve, right? So if the purpose is specifically reducing gun deaths, we can look to, I guess, the meta study that I talked about, where legislation which banned powerful weapons, implementing background checks and requiring people to get permits and licenses. That seems to be the most effective way, as evidenced in like South Africa, for example. But then the question arises, well, who should actually be able to decide if you should be able to restrict guns, right? Like, is it actually a good system to let the majority, like a democratic system, decide whether or not you should be able to take people's guns away? Like, or is that like a tyranny of the majority in this case? Like leaving, for example, let's say, tomorrow 60% of people voted to remove all guns from people, and then once you remove the guns, well, then the 60% of the people who removed the guns from the 40% of the people can now take them over way easier. So the question arises, well, should you be able to democratically vote for removing guns in general, or like restricting who can have guns in general? Is that like something that you value as a society? Yeah, I think that's like an interesting question. In terms of answering that question myself, I honestly don't have a good answer, but I'd love to hear like if anybody else has some valuable input.
Okay.
But while we're between people, I'm going to say no. Sorry.
Grumple, please don't do that again. Last username.
I wish there was some kind of silver bullet regulation, but I've never heard of it. I'm slightly interested in the idea of a kind of sort of licensing scheme, kind of like driving, but that has some big caveats. Like I wouldn't trust the government implicitly to keep those restrictions reasonable, because the government has a strong incentive to make them unreasonable, to make them too strict. I mean, there's probably a lot of little things you can do, like tightening up the background check system, which seems to have a lot of holes and flaws in it. But yeah, I don't know. Like it seems like such a difficult problem, and then you're facing whatever regulations you create. You're facing the question of how does this? Is this actually going to reduce the bad people using guns, the illegal guns, the criminals with guns, more than it infringes? Like any regulation seems to infringe more on the people who we don't mind having guns, much more than the people who we do want to take the guns away from. So it's a really tough problem. You got to deal with the problems of DIY manufacturing, like 3D printed guns and various things like that, which are going to push back against any kind of regulation in the future. So I don't know. I wish I could. I had some solutions here, but it's a difficult problem.
Okay, thank you. BrentoBox.
Like it was discussed, like the real fight over gun legislation isn't even if it's between NRA and like I don't know how we'd necessarily say like anti-gun lobbyists or pro-gun control. It's really a fight over the power to regulate or deregulate guns. It's not necessarily that we can't come up with like a common sense solution to some of these problems that we could all agree on. It's like neither side wants to budge because each side feels like it would be losing, right? Because if anyone gets to put in gun restrictions or they get that kind of power through Congress, I personally believe that they would continue to try and restrict guns the same way that many people would like to continue unrestricting them or, have more liberties with them. We could very much probably have some very common sense, gun laws or gun restrictions that people would feel free to agree on. I think the problem is just that people don't trust each other necessarily. So no one wants to give up the ball.
Okay, freemz.
Oh, freemz, you're muted.
You did.
God damn it. I have a fan running in the background, so I keep muting so it doesn't like.
Oh, I need to get my fan. Holy fuck.
Oh, me too.
I'm your fan right here.
I kind of agree with last username ultimately on a lot of this. I don't think that as much as I think there should be more licensing and regulation, and I wish it could go through and work, but the government doesn't do some things very well. I'm afraid they would drop the ball with this. Also, with it would be weird with the way power changes in America from left to right, and the way those rules will be changed and changed and changed as it goes back and forth. I can't say that it would be. It could possibly be better than what we have now, but I wish I had like the magic answer to what would be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next is going to be Grumple.
The only reason that I see to not rescind the NFA Act of 1934 is because it would cause a money problem for people that put like at least 20 grand into full automatics. If you want to buy an M16 manufactured pre-1986, it's right around 20 grand. And it's totally legal for civilians to do. You just have to pay for the tax stamp, which is $200. It's like that's nothing now. 1934 was a bad thing, but it created a market. Like, you want to buy an FN, basically 249 Golf or whatever machine gun. You want to buy a machine gun? Yeah, you can buy it. Totally legal for civilians too. But you're going to pay a lot because you can only have one that's manufactured before 1986. Which, sorry, this is going to bleed over. This is my last statement. It's going to bleed over. Ronald Reagan allowed A, amnesty for 6 million illegal immigrants, and B, assault weapons ban, quote unquote, in exchange for what?
Okay, I'm gonna end it there. You've gone over a minute. I'm gonna throw it over to Dary.
Oh shit, it's only a minute? Okay, fuck. So at least half of the guns that are illegally used come from legal sources. There are policies such as expanding the ATF, expanding the CDC that will help tackle the problem from a bipartisan view. There are things such as targeted buybacks, gun amnesty, things that we can try, not necessarily have to stay in there forever. We have gun-related misdemeanor crimes from firearm purchases that we can look into. There's things like FBI no gun purchase list, like no fly lists. We can look into that and needs oversight. Of course, community is very important here. Less violence intervention programs that will lead to the root causes of violence. So it's really big. It seems to be really big right now that people are losing community and expanding big government, but there is actually a lot of community oversight in both the police force, and there's a pattern in guns that we can use to improve things for everybody. There's a lot of other legislation, such as things regarding straw purchases or nominee purchases, shooters being screened. We've talked about that one. And again, we have to remember that the gun deaths are mostly done from handguns, something you can carry around in one hand, not rifles. It's a teeny tiny portion of the actual gun deaths. And that should be the problem that we're focused on reducing, is the gun deaths, not what gun it is exactly, because it doesn't seem to matter in this particular problem.
Okay, and finally, MindWaves.
MindWaves, you're muted.
You muted yourself.
Muted.
You're muted, dude.
Is this like our final closing statement?
This is the topic.
Or just for this topic?
Yeah, for the third topic.
Okay, great.
Opening statement.
Opening statement, yeah.
Wait, opening statement? What's the topic?
Well, I'll go back.
Gun control legislation, what are you in favor of?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay, cool. So as far as gun legislation, I think that licensing and registration and having that be constantly needed to be renewed so that you can, have to prove that you are still competent and responsible with the firearm is a good policy to implement. I think that offering a gun buyback program is good to incentivize people that really don't have any investment in owning firearms to give them up so that they don't end up circulating towards people that shouldn't end up with firearms. I think that we can see that strict safe storage laws actually reduces youth suicides by quite a bit. In states that implemented it looks like they hover around like a 9% rate of youth suicides compared to 42% nationally, which is a huge decrease. I think that this whole talk of banning assault rifles is very short-sighted and doesn't really address the underlying issue when it comes to gun ownership, or just gun regulations and preventing people from owning them that shouldn't own them.
Who decides that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. You're done.
I'm sorry.
You're done, mate. You're done. You're done for.
All right, so is it open now? I assume it is. So I think when talking about legislation to reduce some of the issues that guns have, I think it's super important to talk about like legislation that goes outside of specifically like gun legislation as well, because I think a lot of things can be done to reduce the amount of like gun violence by just like funding more schools, like health, giving people better access to healthcare, like solving a lot of the underlying issues which make it so that the people take the streets, right? Like generally the reason why there's so much gun crime in high population areas is because those areas in general have a lot of crime. They have a lot of crime because there's a lot of income inequality. So I think if the issues that you're trying to solve can be solved through other means than restricting guns, and you also want to keep the guns unrestricted, I think you should look at those issues first. Obviously, it makes sense. So why not do it?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, Dario.
Did everybody who still hasn't given their statement on this round?
I think we all gave it.
I think we all gave it.
I think we gave it.
All right.
What
Let's open it up.
what like contentions, if any? I mean, I don't think anyone here was in favor of like nukes for all, but everyone here is in favor of less people dying. So where's like the contention in the policy? Like what specific policies do you guys not like?
Sure. Here's an interesting question. So even if you're able to do like the perfect background checks, right? You're able to determine that somebody isn't like mentally stable or whatever. Do you think like philosophically that you have the right to remove that person's ability to like defend themselves?
Yes.
Defend themselves with a firearm or defend themselves, period?
Well, defend themselves with a firearm, I guess. Like defend them, like the most effective means of like defending yourself, right? Because that's like a big chief concern of like. Well, sure, but like one of the chief concerns that people keep citing, and like people in here cited as well for like keeping firearms, is like personal safety, right? So like removing that personal safety from the person, is that like an ethical thing to do?
You're talking about someone that has been proven or hasn't been proven?
Well, sure. Somebody who has like some mental issues, like in whatever capacity you want to define it. Like where's the line? Like how mentally impaired do you have to be? Like let's say we implement like the background checks that like
I feel like
86...
people. Yeah,
We are
people,
not the people that would.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like people smarter than any of us in here are probably gonna have to get together and figure that out. Like I'm not a doctor or anything that you know.
Sure. So let's say that somebody has I don't know, PTSD or whatever, or
I don't know enough about PTSD to even answer this.
I do. Yes, people with PTSD should not be owning firearms. Yeah.
Well, there's different levels of PTSD though, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like,
Well, sure, but that is something that they would have to work with like their medical professional,
Exactly.
and like consultation from experts and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So like again, we can for the purpose of like limiting harmful uses of guns on like a statistical level, we will agree that stuff like PTSD probably like shouldn't, or like severe PTSD or whatever. The question is then, well, granted the statistics are what they are and like what the dangers are, is it ethical to remove like people's guns like for like any kind of like thing like that?
Yeah,
Ethical.
I mean, is it ethical to put like I don't know, speed limits on people, right? Like, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would argue that speed limits serve like a fundamentally different purpose than like owning a firearm, right? Like we're talking about self-defense.
Would you say it's ethical to tell a blind person they can't drive?
So what?
yes, of course, yes.
Right.
Ethical to tell a blind person they can't operate a motor vehicle.
Sure.
Hold on.
Let me share the libertarian ethical perspective, and this not because I want to make this about libertarianism, but maybe it'll be useful in general.
Yeah.
I mean, in a libertarian society, the way you deal with this is that basically, you know, people generally have the right to carry whatever weapon they want. But if you own some property and people are on your property, then you could also say, well, I don't want. I'm setting the policy for weapons on my property. So you might want to say, I don't want any guns in my store or my nightclub or something like that. Or I want, I'm okay with guns, but only if people have this particular certification, and I decide which certifications are okay. So that's how the sort of the ethics of it, it's basically just a balancing of, it's just the rights of individual people. And that provides a sort of balancing force instead of having this one, state deciding the rule for everyone. So this, I don't know how to apply that to a situation where we have this most property is public. That's where it kind of matters, right? Is like people walking down the street.
I can work with you with that. So a big part of how we would decide who in general, who decides to have weapons, who can, who can't, is the precedent. So for an example, let's just say you have a grandparent going through some mental issues, and you take away their car keys so they don't drive anymore. In a similar sense, you might take away their guns in that because you're worried what they might do with it. So that is like one example where I'm using this as kind of an extreme, and maybe I'll bring it closer. But first, do you agree with that situation where that might be appropriate to remove their weapon?
What's the specific situation?
The specific situation is you have an ailing grandparent that can probably no longer make correct cognitive decisions, and so you remove the weapon that they maybe once used to defend themselves, but now you worry they don't have the mental capabilities to use that weapon properly.
I mean, so situations like when it comes to mental illnesses of various sorts, that gets really, really messy, because I'm not generally okay with the concept of like any mental disorder results in you losing your right to self-defense. Because I mean, the criteria for what constitutes a mental disorder is way too wishy-washy, at least up till now. At the same time, it seems like there are particular mental conditions where it would really obviously a danger, right? If you have like complete psychotic breaks with reality, if you have severe dementia and you just don't know what's real or where you are, then something that seems like really potentially dangerous. So, how you would. So again, it just comes down to a really complicated judgment call.
Sure. That's fine. That's why I set up that standard, just to give you a place to where we can kind of like take the conversation from there, as a situation where clearly there is some metric we can find and we can decide where it is inappropriate for someone to no longer have a weapon, and that might be part of why we would have other laws. And I guess this
it seems like the criteria has to be something more fundamental than just a mental disorder. It has to be like, do you have a grip on reality? Do you understand your actions? Things like that.
It seems like
go more specific, right?
It seems like before you would lose your gun rights, you might also like lose some other kind of right of self-determination or something like that. You would be a ward of the state potentially. Yeah. So it's like if you fall under maybe some other classification, then your rights would be restricted, but maybe only to the same extent that you like couldn't even act as someone else is like your power of attorney. You've been unable to. You're not a functioning adult.
I think another interesting question is, granted that all of these things apply that we just talked about, who would be, I guess, who could we possibly trust to enforce this in a fair manner that didn't have like a side in this, right? Because obviously the government has a side in this. Like the government is biased, as we talked about previously, because the government has an interest in you not rebelling against the government, right? Obviously. So the question then becomes, well, who is going to enforce these unfit laws?
The people's militia that we form ourselves. All right, we're gonna police ourselves.
Possibly.
No, you know the answer. It's the government, and of course they have interests involved, right?
Yeah, but I don't like the answer that the government should do it, right?
Well, sure. So we don't have to necessarily be the government. Again, I had to go through the points quick because we only had a minute. But expanding the ATF right now, the way to keep track of things cannot be digitized. They literally have to have stacks of paper to keep track of shit, which is just one of like a bunch of problems that they have, like the ability to talk to gun dealers. That can only happen like once a year. You can't hold gun dealers accountable for the shit that they sell. There's a lot of problems, and those problems could be alleviated if we do things like expand the ATF. And as far as the mental health question goes, if we allow the CDC to do more research into things like depression and some of the disturbing statistics, then we might have a place to go. Like we're so far. The problem is the legislation is so new, and being able to talk about it is that it gets stonewalled every single time, because of places like the NRA.
Sure. So I think this can I just quickly propose a solution?
Sure. And then after that, we're gonna go to Turk since he's just got on the show.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Does he want to introduce himself?
No, go ahead. You can go.
Yes. Sure. So I posed a question like, who would do this, right? And like I've done a bit of thinking about this. Obviously, in like my perfect society, I don't think something like a state or like a federal government would ever exist as it exists right now. When that has been said, I think in the current society in the United States, maybe one solution could be to localize the laws more. So, for example, you could say like a combination of localizing more and a combination of increasing the mobility of people, right? So you could have like certain cities or like certain even smaller communes or areas where you could say, well, in this area, we're not so strict about gun laws. And everybody in this area buys into this, and it is on them to enforce like whatever gun laws they have. And if you don't like it, you can freely move to another area, like right next to it or whatever, which has like more stricter or less stricter gun laws. And by facilitating people's ability to move, combined with more localized laws, which would take into account these individual scenarios, I feel like we could sort of get around the issue of having like a big government authority, sort of forcing it upon the people.
You'd still have little government authorities, though. I mean,
well, yeah, but like those would be more opt-in
localized
sort of thing. Yeah, more localized and opt-in.
It's a slight improvement. I would take it a step further and just say that let the people who own the property decide. Like it may be that just as
I feel like that was
a complicated problem that it just requires the judgment of individual people in order to solve it, because it's so context specific and there's so many different things you have to take into account to decide whether someone should have some right or not, that it just has to be decided on an individual basis, right?
I don't know. I think this idea that like if we just make the people that decide who does or does not get firearms smaller, that it's somehow going to make the problem better. I don't know. Like I don't think what's it's about stopping a commune. What's stopping a commune or like a community from being like, okay, well, just white people get to own guns in this community, right?
Well,
I mean, I would like federal oversight. I don't want states' rights when it comes to gun legislation.
Sure. So the core tenet of what I was like, there was two core tenets, right? The one core tenet was like more localized democracy. The second core tenet was free movement that would be enforced by some like combined authority of like different communes, right? So the free movement entails that, well, if like one area of like a city, like let's say 100 people decided, well, only white people can own guns here, well, then you can move to the commune next door, which has like
just move black people, just move to the next commune.
I mean, that's already.
I feel like you're not understanding the argument. I'm saying I'm presupposing I'm prestating the answer to a question, and I'm saying you would facilitate the free movement, right? It's not just free move. They would actively get help to move wherever they wanted to move. Yeah, but that
act in and of itself, the pressure put on them to have to move is alienating in and of itself, right? There should be no pressure for these people to leave their community to which they're deeply rooted in, just because suddenly the people around them decide that they don't get to own firearms.
Well, sure, but it's a question of like it's a question of democracy, right? Like, do you want communities to be able to like govern themselves to some extent and like decide?
No, not on every issue. No, absolutely not.
But and if a subset of a community doesn't like the direction the community is going, why not move?
Well, I mean, you're making the state's argument for slavery right now. You know, if the South wants to secede and they want to have slavery, they should be within the means to do so.
No.
You know, if that's the will of the people.
Well, no. So again,
that's totally
not the will of the slaves, though.
Yeah.
So the argument presupposes these issues or like pre-answers these issues already, like by presupposing the ability to free move.
So under socialism, when we have free movement of people and we facilitate that somehow, then that makes it okay to like alienate people away from their communities because
no, it's not.
We're more concerned with like localized democracy instead of like democracy on like the federal level.
Well, no, it's not something that happens overnight, right? And there's solutions to all these problems. Like
ultimately, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so the issue isn't that, like, the answer isn't that this is like a perfect solution, right? There is a problem, and I'm posing.
No,
a
this isn't a
solution.
solution at all, though. We're talking about fantasies. We're not talking about policy proposals anymore.
No,
Well, no,
I don't think you can fully avoid situations where someone finds that they sort of landed in a situation where I just can't live here, because people are going to be born into those situations. I don't think any system can possibly avoid that. And so, but I think you're kind of like what Dario's talking about is kind of getting at a good idea. It's sort of halfway to the, the libertarian idea, except that instead of communes voting on something, you just have individual people deciding on the policy for the property.
Yeah,
they
that
own.
sounds terrible.
But but Dario's also.
Well, and you can imagine scenarios that are terrible, but it seems to me like it's going to, in a sense, it comes to the optimum that it might be the best that you can do.
So
right?
even if I was to fumble around with this idea that like this is like somehow plausible, like why does like I don't know why like this isn't a policy solution that we're talking about, right? It seems like we're more hung up on like individual.
Well, it's
no, it's not though, right? Because
series.
like we would have to implement. We would have to be in a completely different society than we are right now, right?
No,
like I don't know. We're supposed to be talking about policy proposals.
Yeah,
that we can actually
Dari
put
had
forward.
Well, you can do this largely already. Like nightclubs already ban guns inside them, right? So this is not a huge divergence from what we have. It's just, I guess it would just be, giving people more leeway to make the
no, but the argument here is that like the federal government should step back and not be involved in gun laws at all
not what
at the
Dari's
state or local
promoting.
level.
That's not
but
what
also
Dari's
not
promoting.
Well,
Dairy.
Dairy,
what
sorry.
what I'm saying is that like the idea is not have the federal government set a broad policy for everyone, but also not stop people from setting strict policies on their own private property. Like I'm pretty sure now your store can't say like no guns, because that violates the Second Amendment. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe you should let private property owners override the gun rights of anyone if they're on their property.
So can I introduce myself and go?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I'm Turk. I'm a Republican. I like guns, so I'm a little more coherent than the last guy that was. So I heard all of these statements throughout the night. To Dairy, you're asking for the ATF to be expanded, right?
Yep.
So that goes against the local emphasis on regulating themselves and governing who can't own guns. So I, as a Republican, I don't like expanding the federal government. I've actually worked with the ATF. I've filed for FFLs and stuff. Have any of y'all messed with the FFL or any ATF agents?
I deal with my family owns a distillery, so I deal with the ATF pretty frequently.
Yeah, I mean, they are decent people, but they do a lot of bad stuff also. There was the whole gun laundering thing going to Mexico. I mean, they are just like a standard federal agency, and they are not immune from being corrupt or being perfect. They actually wanted me to have an FFL, and my local HOA didn't let me have an FFL. So, I don't think they're a good alternative to enforce any of these legislation that actually happens. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know where to cut it because you addressed me specifically. So one of the problems with the ATF that I'm talking about is specifically the firearms portion of the ATF. There are a lot of specific problems with the ATF that seem unreasonable, and so they become unfit to do their jobs. And we haven't seen an ATF version regarding firearms where they could do their job. And what I mean by their job is such things like being able to record things like gun sales and overall keep track of the circulation of weapons in the country. And that circulation seems to be a core problem with firearms. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to reduce or even increase the firearms, just the amount that we have now. We can do more with the amount that we have now if we can just keep track of things.
So you're wanting the ATF to track individual gun sales across the United States. So that would be a national registry.
So they kind of already do, but it's all in fucking paper. It's all in paper. Like,
exactly.
That's ridiculous.
As a digital person, I completely understand that. But what you're saying is you want to track the movement of all firearms and the people that own said firearms, and that, if that's a slippery slope, right?
How so?
To what?
If you get pulled over, let's say, and you have a record of I don't know, something bad, and then they instantly say, "Oh, you're on your directory as you have a firearm," and they can instantly put you on a new level of confrontation. So it's like, well, national registries are not.
That's not necessarily. That's not necessarily true, though, right? Because now we're starting to talk about. Now we're starting to talk about police practices and how they handle individuals that have firearms, right? We can have a society where police don't automatically escalate just because people have firearms, right? I understand that is the case right now, but that doesn't have to be the case. Like that is a problem with like the training and like the purview of like what cops do in the nation as of right now.
So we're asking for the police officers to be able to better handle knowing someone's got a firearm, potentially. So what about if they don't know that guy has got a firearm?
There's a need. So the easy response to this, actually, and what you're talking about is things like window policy polices, or profiling, as it's sometimes called, and that there's a lot of reform I've gone through when it comes to regarding the police. And one of the important things I like to do is to make sure that the policies I propose can work from a bipartisan perspective, and there's little stats to back it up. And so ending profiling would be one way to end the problem that you have, where your issue is if the police see that you have a weapon and a record, then that makes.
But that's not profiling. That's looking at data and saying, oh, this guy could have a weapon, I'm going to treat him differently.
Well, that's different, because one of the things that you're supposed to do as an officer is ask if they have a weapon on them. And there's no change necessary if you know that. Like, you could even say, do you have your weapon on you now? You could say that, I suppose.
And then someone like jerks, right? And then the police have an inane response to that kind of an action.
And I think police suck for that reason, because that is their response, and they're hair trigger cowards, and they don't respond to jerking with shooting people. But that happens regardless anyway. The problem that we would be attacking then is police reform and not gun reform. And I don't think these two things are a necessary component of each other.
Anyways, I just disagree that expanding the ATF would help at all. I think expanding the ATF is going to be another, snowball effect, where we're just going to keep expanding and having more and more unvoted on regulation. I don't know how much rule making power the ATF has. They've changed their minds on several implementations of rules in the past that have made instant gun owners felons if they didn't follow the protocols that are not elected on and not really widely distributed in common knowledge across America.
Well, that's fair, right? I mean, like, if you go about obtaining a firearm illegally, or you don't go through the necessary legal means to obtain it.
Like, if you bought a bump stock, you're now a felon, dude. And no one voted on it.
Yeah.
No one voted on it. The ATF said, "Oh,
I agree.
That's illegal."
Wait, wasn't that? I thought that was a Trump executive order, wasn't it?
Executive order, yeah.
Yeah, but that's dumb.
That was executed by the ATF.
Yeah, but they
made a rule change.
So earlier in this
at the demand of the president, just to be very clear.
Dary really wants to get something out quick.
I was just saying, earlier in this conversation, we discussed one of the issues with policy legislation is the competency of the people writing the legislation in regards to weapons. They don't know what the fuck they're doing, in short. So that is something that we can address. But in a discussion regarding how to improve things, that can just be one of the things that we can improve. It's not necessarily, okay, well, this situation isn't perfect, so it's not a nirvana. It's not the best possible world that anyone can ever imagine, so let's do nothing instead. I am more concerned about what we can do now, and it doesn't seem to be impossible to imagine a world where the people writing the legislation have some competency in like what a bump stock is, and while still being able to fix the travesty that is the ATF and what they're supposed to do with what they have, when it's literally they have 100-year-old weapons stored in closets that are uncategorized, that are just sitting there. They have piles and piles of desks and paperwork. When a gun dealership crashes down or whatever the case is, they get piles of paperwork they have to go through. It's a mess. It is the job that they are supposed to be doing. It's so bad they can't even do what they already have power for. So when it comes to expanding it, we're not talking about unreasonable lengths here.
I just disagree. And then if I can keep going.
On what grounds?
I disagree that in enhancing a bureaucratic entity of the executive branch is not going to be a positive way forward.
Let me ask
You just said the same thing in different words, but like why? On like what basis?
Because they can arbitrarily change the definitions of laws without going through congressional approvals. They can enforce selective laws, just like the Justice Department, EPA, etc. It's just another executive branch that is very loosely defined and can do its own thing within its reason.
Let me propose to you something very specific then, and you can give me your judgment. If we were able to scan the paperwork that they have, would you be opposed to that? That they already have?
I think if they said like this firearm was sold, I think that's fine. But knowing who has that firearm, it goes against, I'd have to, it's what is it, the 14th? I don't know. But I just think that it's going to violate my civil rights having the government know that I have a firearm.
But I think you might need to expand on that for me to agree.
I would have to do some research and get back to you.
Sure.
I don't want the federal government knowing that I have access to a firearm and then can have knowledge of what I have and what I do. As a Republican, I have the freedom and liberty to do that.
What is your worry about them knowing you have a weapon? What do you think is going to be the outcome of that?
It doesn't matter. It could be anything. It could be I own a pistol with 15 rounds in its magazine, and then they say, oh, you can only have 7-round magazines. They go and look at this list, and they say, oh, Turk, you're a felon now. They're going to come to my house and inspect it for magazine stuff.
Sure. So there's something called amnesty, which whenever there's a policy in place that greatly goes
grandfather,
yeah, the greatly.
What if they don't have that?
Well, then we can work with that. We can include that in the policies.
If there's a mandatory gun buyback, what am I going to do?
A mandatory gun back is actually fairly extreme in regards to gun policy legislation.
Yeah, but they then now know I have a firearm, and I would then have to comply with that law.
So you're talking about an extreme law. And again, I want to avoid something called the nirvana fallacy, whereas unless a legislation perfectly complies with my wishes, we should do nothing in response. So I want to create something that is better, that people will ultimately overall agree with. And one of the things that I think we can do is just simply keep track of things better. Now, one of the ways, again, amnesty is a very important word here because there's things like targeted gun buybacks, mandatory as like a possibly most extreme version of it, where like if you have some mental conditions and the government wants to take your guns, it's because you are deemed incapable by every kind of metric we can imagine. Literally, you're they're talking about shooting people, like the whole thing. This is a complete right-wing point. Is the guy like Dylan Roof, like the FBI should have gone there. He had all these complaints. He shouldn't have had a weapon. Blah blah blah. That kind of person would be possibly not even in this program. That's how extreme we're talking about in numbers. And so those people have to sell their guns back. But that would be the most extreme version that I can think of. And even still, I think it's still very bipartisan.
But obviously, more surveillance of the citizens has always been like a wedge issue in the United States. Like generally the trend is going towards like more and more, like less and less privacy of like the average person. And the question is then, well, do you want to give up more privacy in terms of like whether or not you have like the ability to like defend yourself, right? And like what kind of abuses could come out of that? That is sort of the question being posed, right? Because you can say there's a lot of good that comes out of concepts like face recognition technology, right? The ability to constantly know like where everybody is. Crimes would get solved much faster. The question is what you give up worse than the potential dangers of the policy?
And that's a question of every policy that should be considered. The thing that I'm talking about is not something that doesn't already exist. That's the sweet catch there that you have to consider, is that there already is documentation for a lot of the weapons that people have. It already exists. The thing is, it exists in paper format, and it gets sent to the ATF in paper format. So they can't do the job that already exists and already has records of. And
Sure, I wasn't specifically talking about like that. I was more talking about like even the concept of like the ATF.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought we were talking about like a specific policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Dario, are you just saying that the ATF is essentially like has obsolete technology or obsolete
imagine having
ways of dealing with it?
In 2020, like how fucking stupid is that?
I mean, have any of y'all bought a firearm before?
I've used
yes.
Yeah, I mean, you go in and you check boxes on a physical piece of paper. So, like, I understand what you're going through, but I mean, once we go to that electronic, you're then violating the privacy rights of whoever's buying a firearm.
How is that private? Why is it not the same on paper? Like, why does that distinction matter to you?
Probably because I'm a decent citizen and I don't want the government tracking my every step.
So they are, but it's only in paper. That's the point.
So the answer is quite. It isn't like a logical connection, right? But it is a thing that happens, right? There's a reason why elections are done on like paper and not on like machines, right? I mean, there's a bunch of different things that can go wrong once records are electronic. I mean, that's the reason why like the most important documents are always like pretty much kept like out of electronic things, because I mean, it can get hacked, it can get used for like nefarious purposes, like all of these things, right?
I maybe I've missed.
So we're worried about people hacking who has like the ATF database or something.
I mean, someone could hack the database that has mischievous intent and could go and dox somebody, or hey, well, this guy's got a firearm, we got to go get it.
Unless you have all your money stuffed in pillows, I don't think you actually disagree with the effectiveness of the digital world.
No.
So the issue here is about voting specifically.
My issue is I don't want to be tracked on a national database for my Second Amendment right, and then expanding a federal bureaucratic agency is not a positive way to go through this problem. I'm more in favor of the more localized effort for the states and local governments to enforce their own laws.
Sure. I mean, it could be multifaceted. Again, we don't have whenever we talk about policy, we don't have to talk about one thing implemented to fix the problem. And the goal of, and this is protecting gun rights advocates. The thing that I'm proposing, which is why it is heavily supported on the right, the thing that I'm talking about is protecting the right wing, because the idea that people are getting weapons illegally is the problem here. And so if people, legal gun owners, are selling weapons, which the big part of how gun crime happens is people illegally get guns from people that got it legally. Those legal gun owners that aren't selling weapons to, you could say, thugs on the streets or whatever way you want to phrase that, the ones that aren't doing that are protected, and the ones that are doing that are the ones getting fucked.
Yeah, I just disagree. I don't think that having a national registry is.
What would be your answers to the problem then?
I'm more in favor of what some of these other people have said, and having more state and local government enforcement of laws and having their.
The only problem with that is I live 30 minutes away from the state border. So if my state sets up a law that I'm like, well, I can't buy a gun, but I can just go 30 minutes across the border and I can get it here.
Well, then your local entity should be able to enforce the laws that they've enacted. And if you are caught doing a mischievous act or crime, you get punished how they see fit. It shouldn't be California dictates my gun laws and I get.
What I'm saying is, though, it wouldn't stop any of the things that we're talking about, like people getting guns illegally and then committing crimes with them.
It could be. It could. Your local jurisdictions could be enforcing the laws that are on the books. We don't have to have federal oversight.
Having it be local.
And freemz, that's a huge argument against any gun control policy.
I don't know. I think like federal policies, it still makes sense.
Like, how local are we talking about? Like, because the laws that are made at the state level, usually the argument for that is that, well, since we don't know what the law should be, we'll let all the states choose their own, and then we'll see which ones work best. And you'll have this sort of competitive market of laws or something. But within any state, you're going to have the full range of, you can have urban communities and rural and all different types. So it's not like, it's probably not in this case that some laws will work better for some states and you can't really customize those laws for different states. Not much in this case. So at best, you're just going to have a system of sort of experimentally working out what these laws should be, but which is fine, but it doesn't really help us. Like, we're trying to guess at what these laws should be, right?
I mean,
what do you think?
The Second Amendment guarantees you the right to own a firearm, and there's legal precedent that says that. And then now we're trying to change the rules a little bit. And at a federal level, you're going to be stripping everyone's rights away. I would much rather have a more localized effort to dictate gun policy at my local level than, you know, have freemz have a vote on how I own a firearm.
So if your state wanted to do a gun registry, would you be down?
I would be more inclined to have the discussions at a local level. Yes, I would still not agree with it, but I think
what is it about the
more
local
that seems antithetical to what you said before. I'm not sure why it matters, like, to what, like, how big the governing body is, or like what governing body it is that's taking taking away your rights, right?
Also, either way, you have someone above you making these rules, whether it's federal or state.
Yeah, but I can easily go talk to my local representative, and he would actually be like talking.
So it's okay when a boot's on your neck, as long as the boot is like closer to you, or like more like in your community, as opposed to like on the federal level.
He might actually listen to me. I've received letters from my local
good luck
congressman and my
asking for that boot to be lifted off your neck, even if it's like at the state level.
Okay, let's listen to Turk for a second.
Yeah.
What do you mean, Turk? What do you mean by that?
I have actually talked to people in my local governments, and talked with local people, and you actually get feedback from your local governments, and that's why city and local elections are really important, guys. And when it comes to firearm laws and the enforcement of those laws, that's why local enforcement is so important. Because, you know, Montana doesn't have the same, you know, local restrictions or local events that, you know, maybe New York or Maine or Texas. So yeah, I think a national law is just way too restrictive on my Second Amendment rights.
Hold on, real quick. That's it's false. It's been struck down several times in the Supreme Court that it's individual right for the Second Amendment, revolving around your individual right. Now it's still law, but it's not Supreme Court. It's not the Second Amendment right. So just it might be just a technicality to you, but that is just a factually incorrect.
I think the Supreme Court case, if you wanted to look into it, isn't it Nunn versus State, the big Supreme Court case that decided that? Yeah.
Can I just break in for a second? I think that there is merit to the argument that like more democratic processes on like lower levels generally equal more like democratic rule and like more democratic consensus. Like, let's say, for example, that every single person in the world had to like vote, and like 51% would like pass something, right? That would disenfranchise like billions of people, right? But if you break it down into like more and more like smaller democracies, like smaller levels, like the potential for people to not like to have their voice overturned is much smaller.
Yeah,
I'm in favor of community.
I wouldn't argue with that either. I'm not saying that like there's never a situation where there should be like stuff broke down to like a more local level, but in my opinion, guns are not one of those things.
Sure, I mean that's fine. I was just like people laughed when Turk said it, and I just wanted to
back him up. Yeah, it's really blurring who's the left and who's the right in this.
Well, Dari likes playing devil's advocate for the sake of the argument.
That's true.
I'm
I
not
do.
playing devil's advocate at all. I'm just not a statist like most of the people on this panel. I don't know.
Wait, I guess it's confusing. Do you say Dari or Dario?
Oh, sorry, I meant Dario. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I haven't actually, MindWaves, I haven't played devil's advocate once during this conversation.
Well, it did come across as that, I don't know if you meant to, but because like you spent the first half of this conversation tonight like talking about why we need more like federal laws and like oversight and stuff like that, and then you kind of like reversed halfway through.
Yeah. So I'll explain why, because I actually talked about this on stream before.
Well, I know why. I'm just not interested in that conversation, I guess. I don't know. There's a more interesting conversation to be had.
Sure, I think that's fair if you don't think that's interesting. I think generally it's interesting to listen to like the best arguments of both sides, because I think both sides have merits. I think the questions are so complicated right now in the United States that there's no easy answers. And I think the only way that you can find a valid answer is to go in depth into like both sides of the argument and figure out like what is the best solution going from there. I think a lot of the solutions are, or from my perspective, I think have to be more creative. If you're I guess, in any sense of the way, want to achieve what you want to achieve, right? So the reason why I talk so much about like federal laws and like statistics and stuff like that is that I do believe that doing like big sweeping federal changes will reduce the amount of gun crime and the amount of gun deaths. The question there is, do you value that more than what you're losing? And that's the question I'm not sure about. That's the question that's why I'm on this panel. It's to hear people's perspectives.
Yeah, I think that we should definitely view. It seems to come down to people valuing freedom as more of a end as opposed to a means, right? Like, so it seems like those on the panel that view freedom as like an ends. They are more willing to sacrifice people's lives for the sake of their freedom, right? And I guess that's just I don't view freedom as an ends. It's purely a means for sure.
Sure, I view freedom as an ends.
Yeah,
generally.
That's weird.
Yeah, so there's a lot of policies that we can talk about, and community is even one of those avenues where we can talk about how to improve things. One specific example would be that the gun dealerships have relationships with the mental health institutions of that city. So if something suspect happens, if there's a level of education so the gun dealerships can recognize that certain customers coming in, just things of that nature. There are community-based policies as well that we can talk about. So specifically something that should work with Turk's perspective.
So one of the responsibilities as a gun reseller is to judge the mental capacity of people, and not just by reading and rubber stamping a piece of paper. You know, gun dealers constantly are rejecting people's purchases. They see it, they see the paper, they see someone doing a straw purchase. Gun dealers have that authority and they have that responsibility. I agree there. So maybe we need to enhance the gun dealer's ability to execute that. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. That's one teeny, again, this is a tiny policy, dropping that from all the different things that we can do and you should do. But just having the connections between the gun dealerships and the mental health community enhances what you're talking about. And that's how it's been done. And I have examples of that working to help people too.
Yeah. And I also think local gun education, you know, in your high schools, maybe not middle schools, that's more up to the parents, but like, you know, having more firearm education and training in general, even if you don't plan on using a firearm, is really important, because I think MindWaves was talking about child misuse of firearms leading into tragedies and stuff. You know, if people knew and respected the tool, like the previous guy was talking about, there would be a much reduced body count.
But what is the pressure that's going to make people care about that shit?
I don't know. The media,
federal oversight and accountability, like laws, legislation. That's what's going to do that. That's the only means.
That's going to make people care.
Yeah. Like, how else do you hold people accountable that don't engage in these behaviors?
I think at a local level, you could start to institute more education programs towards firearms.
But how do you?
Sure, but education doesn't matter if they like. Even if you educate people, if they like refuse to engage in like safe practices, how do you hold those people accountable? That's the point. Like if a parent, for instance, decides to own a firearm but doesn't like properly store it in a gun safe, etc., and like easily allows their children access to their firearm, how do we hold people like that accountable? Like, right?
I mean, then we would enforce the laws on the books if your local state has those kinds of laws.
Yeah, but we need those laws. Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying get rid of them. I'm saying we need to enforce the law. If a child gets access to an unlocked firearm in your state or locality, you need to throw the book at the guy.
Yeah, and I would argue if you're okay with that at like a state or local level, you should be okay with that at a federal level as well.
No, I don't think the federal government needs to enact that kind of sweeping legislation.
I don't think that we should allow people to die in the meantime just because we want to wait for states to like finally come to the realization that these sorts of laws prevent people from dying.
Well, I mean, but that's just an argument. You're just saying any law that is good in the state level should be good on the federal level.
Well, this particular one, like when it comes to requiring people to store their firearms responsibly, yeah, I think that is a fair legislation on the federal level. Yeah.
So what if you live in a more rural area? We were talking about that earlier as well. And having easy access to a firearm helps you defend yourself from, snakes, not rabbits, animals and stuff. So you have, a truck gun, right? So, but I can't have that if a national level of locking up your gun is an act.
Well, here's the hard-hitting issue is that we're not worried about how many people are dying to snake attacks each year. We want to try to reduce the tens of thousands of gun deaths in the country.
I was just using an example as to why a national sweeping law might not be more.
Snake attacks.
It's an example, but it's an example.
Snake attacks. How many people do you think die of snake attacks?
So I have a question.
There are still ways to safely store your firearm in a car, and there are states that have provisions that require you to store it in a certain way that is more safe, right? It doesn't. It like having it on your window behind you in your truck is almost no different than going to a compartment or something, right?
Have you ever tried to get your firearm out of the glove box of your?
Bro, a snake isn't sitting there with a 9mm about to shoot you. Okay, you can fucking go and get your gun. Let's live in reality for a second.
If there's a snake in your house, you're not going to shoot it with a gun either. That's
fucking hell, dude.
Bigger than snakes. All right.
I know what you mean, though. You're talking about animals in general. I mean, you said
bears, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait, can I ask a few questions for Turk? So Turk, you would recognize, right, that restricting guns in some capacity would lead to less people being at risk of dying by guns, right? That's obvious, right? So the question is then, one of the big reasons why you want to make these things federal laws and apply it equally everywhere is that people currently in the United States have very restricted mobility. It's very hard to just or even very inconvenient to just move from one area or another. And the issue would be that if you leave these things up to the local municipalities combined with people's inability to move, you would have a lot of people just being stuck in an area where they have a way higher chance to die to guns without having any recourse.
Yeah, there's not really a restricted mobility in the U.S., Dario.
I mean, effectively there is, in terms of the how much money people have saved up, combined with all of the issues of finding a suitable job in a different area and moving from one society to another, moving away from friends and family. There's a lot of barriers.
There's certainly challenges and barriers, but I don't know if they're unique or I would characterize it as uniquely difficult to move between any area or state in the U.S.
Well, sure, it's not unique per se. In the U.S., the only thing that's more unique than other first world countries, I guess, is the income inequality, right? There's more people who don't necessarily have the money to move.
I think there's plenty of areas in the United States where poor low-income person could move to. I mean, we have people that come over the border with nothing, and these people are praised for starting a new life. I think if they can do it, then anyone could do it.
Sure. But the goal isn't to just have the goal. The goal isn't to just have people move to an area where they could possibly live. The goal is to have people thrive and live where they can do the best with their labor. Where their
if they're
labor
not
has the
thriving
most value.
in these areas, I think moving is a really good option.
And then I would also argue that at a local level, work on your local city council, work on your neighborhood, try to, make a difference in your local area instead of asking an entire nation to change its way.
Oh yeah, sure. And I get that. I was making that argument previously, right? Because I understand that side of the point. The other side is saying, well, if your local area votes for something that tremendously endangers your life and you're voted down, well, then you're basically fucked, right? I mean, yeah.
First off, hold on. We're talking. You said the entire nation. How much of the nation do you think are actually gun owners?
I don't know.
Yeah, not the entire nation, that's for sure.
But it's a right that's given to everyone if they want to exercise it.
But we're not talking about.
It's a third of the nation.
Yeah, a third of the nation.
30%.
Yeah, it's less. It's actually
32% or something like that.
But then out of that third percent, we'll go up. We'll round up to a whole third. Out of that third, how much of those people do you think are willing to give up their weapons let's just say, again, this is the extreme version of everything. How much do you think that a third are willing to give up their weapons if it means, like, I don't know, buybacks or something? A substantial amount is the correct answer to that. And we know that from how buybacks have worked in selected people, how much of that third has given up their weapons. So I'm uncomfortable with setting up the narrative that any gun legislation is A, taking away all guns, and B, affecting the entire nation. It's actually a small portion. That needs to be clear.
How do we know that, Dary? What you said
which one?
That it would be successful, or many people would be willing to participate in a gun buyback.
Okay, yeah. There's hold on. There's a few different places where buybacks have had results. Let me find one.
Places in America where a buyback has been done and it was successful.
So if you're talking about places in America, you can, if you're trying to, or if your logic is going to be, okay, buybacks didn't like reduce crime or something in the area, if that's where you're gonna go to, that's one different thing. I just want you to be aware of that before
I'm just thinking that it surprises me to hear that gun buybacks would be successful in America. I would think that very few people would be willing to participate. I mean, as a percentage.
Participation is all the things that I'm just talking about right now. Just participating in buybacks, and people have shown participation. That's okay. Good. So yeah, there. Hold on. Oh, I don't know if I have that one right off hand. But yeah, you don't think that? So before I find this, just to make sure. So when I go through this time to actually find it, you're saying people don't participate in buybacks? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, this is the first time I've heard this, but I've talked to hundreds of gun owners. I don't know a single one that would participate in a gun buyback. I know that that's an anecdote, and but
sure,
that sounds interesting.
Okay, sure. This is gun buyback participation. I have a thing on gun buybacks, but it's not in the United States.
Australia.
Yeah.
It didn't really work too well.
It worked fantastic, actually.
Well, that's not true at all. Yeah.
Yeah. It not only worked fantastic, but there was a recent study reaffirming that because there was controversy, and the chances of it not being effective is 1 in 200,000 that it wasn't effective. And I have that study actually on hand. But I'm trying to find one about buyback participation. And
it actually coincides with a reduction of suicides as well, which is yeah.
Investors like buybacks. That's an interesting study. Fuck, where is it? Man, I have to get back to you on buyback participation. That's not like a source that I had ready. Again,
well, just to be real quick, the only study that showed that that the buyback program in Australia was wasn't as effective as being stated was that the argument put forward by the study, or I guess the conclusion rather, I should say, was that the gun buyback didn't do too much because the laws that they already had in Australia were already strong enough, and that's the only study that at all pushes back at the effectiveness of the gun buyback. Everything else that I've read basically goes to show that it did reduce the amount of people that own firearms, and it coincides with a reduction in suicide. So,
and the study I was talking about, I did post in Discord.
Here's just
I'll take a look.
Just get this.
Which channel did you post it in?
The whole 9 members channel.
Yeah, you're not in there. I'll add you quick. Don't worry.
Come on.
I'll add you. Don't worry.
I'm trying to educate myself. Come on.
Okay, I'll get you in there quick. There you go.
Click this link.
And by the way, I love looking at data. I'm a data guy. So
me too.
I have a whole bunch of data that's pro gun as well.
Yeah, I've probably seen it, but I'd be happy to anything you talk about that you feel the need to throw a study at. I'll take a look at it.
You want to say that will probably we have 30 minutes left overall if we had to, but we're in the overtime now, so I'll give it about another 10 minutes unless the conversation picks back up.
Can I propose a legislation?
Sure. I mean, we got 10 minutes left, so yeah.
Yeah. National reciprocity. I think that if I have the right to conceal carry a firearm in Texas, I should be able to go to Oklahoma, Nebraska, wherever with that firearm.
What problem does this seek to solve?
Giving me that warm fuzzy that I won't get prosecuted for a felony if I happen to leave it in my car, or if I.
So we're talking about policies that seek to reduce the amount of gun violence in the United States.
No, the
You're talking about an issue completely unrelated to that, right?
I think the question was what gun policies are you in favor of? Was the original.
Yeah. So I actually have an interesting question there. So who would enforce the national reciprocity? That would be like the federal government, I guess.
Yeah. That's not a state level thing.
No, so the federal reciprocity would mean each state is required to accept the law or the license or whatever that the person carries from state to state. So if I got pulled over, why is that okay?
Yeah, that the federal government get involved in state matters to that degree.
Interstate commerce.
Yeah, so like your argument previously was that you wanted to have these issues as localized as possible, and I agree with that argument. That's like my argument as well. But then you're proposing a change that would be like a sweeping like federal, or at least if not a federal legislation, it would surely be enforced federally, right? Because you would have to.
No, it would be enforced locally. And if I had a firearm in my glove box, like it's legally supposed to be locked up, and if I got pulled over, going to see my grandma or whatever, if I go into a state that doesn't allow it, I could get thrown in jail and all that.
Sure, but if the go ahead.
Yeah, you would in that change, you would basically seek to equalize the gun laws across like every single like place in the U.S., right?
No,
So
it would just allow me as a citizen of my state to be able to exercise my rights without getting alienated by where I'm going.
Can other states refuse a standard that you are talking about?
That was the question I was going to ask.
They currently do.
Well, okay.
No, but
So if you live in Vermont, or is it Vermont or Delaware? I forget which one it is. And you bring your firearm to New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or whatever. You'll go to prison.
Okay.
Well, that's because those laws aren't on the books, right? If those laws were on the books that you're asking for, basically what we're saying is like the state and local officials don't get an option to enforce those laws, right? They are mandated by the federal government to have to enforce those.
Yeah. So as somebody who is very much against like big government or regulations and like governments making regulations for like different states or areas or whatever, I would just say it would be up to you as a private citizen owning a gun in like whatever community or state or city that you're from where you're able to do so. It would be your responsibility to know the rules of the area or state or whatever you're entering and then following those rules.
Yeah. And that's currently how it lives. As a firearm owner, I have to abide by all laws.
Yeah.
So this does kind of expose a problem with the whole local democracy idea, right? We want to have local regions, states, and we want to be able to move freely between them. Which means you need some kind of common agreement on what rights are. But here you have a situation where someone someone's rights in one state, as soon as they cross that line, become potentially a serious crime. And not only that, but the state where it's a crime is not democratically accountable to that person at all, since their person doesn't live in that state, so they can't vote for the government. Something seems unfair about that. It seems like this creates a loophole where a state can be overly can persecute people from out of state, and they're not in any way accountable to those people, right?
Well, sure. So the question there is, should different areas be able to, I guess, have their own laws that restrict like either who gets to like bring like certain items into them or whatever? I guess is the question. And I would say, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if there is a state who is like, hey, we're very much anti-gun, we don't want people bringing in guns, I'd say that makes sense.
Sure. My point is just that it exposes the problem with the whole the assumption that democracy will keep these laws accountable, because democracy isn't actually a good a way of representing the people who are affected by the law. It just represents people who live within those boundaries. But here we have a situation where the people who are affected by those laws.
Yeah, and I see that angle, and I kind of agree now that we're talking about it, and that's why we're doing it. But it's like one of the only like pro-gun legislations that's actually out there in existence. So I just wanted to, hear what y'all.
Sure.
Well,
yeah.
wait,
So
I push back on that. There's a lot of pro-gun. In fact, there's a lot of legislation pushed from the right that I agree with, and people that are like the gun holders, quote unquote, have proposed a lot of legislation, to go with things like universal background checks is just one of those examples.
That's not pro-gun.
It's definitely pro-gun, because here's the thing: is we want to protect legal gun holders. Is that not a goal of yours, to protect legal gun holders from doing what they do?
I don't think that's the end goal of that piece of legislation.
Okay, but I'll get to that. But I just want you to see, like, is this something that you agree with? Like,
I do not agree on the universal gun background checks. Background checks, if you buy from a retailer, are already in process, and each locality has their own laws in terms of retail sales. If I'm going to sell my gun as a responsible gun owner, I shouldn't have to do a background check to sell to someone that I deem can buy a gun. I know this is
that's a. Do you think that you're capable of making that decision, right? Like,
I am,
and even if you are, do you trust that other people are? That other people won't engage in that behavior with nefarious purposes, or have it end up in some sort of tragedy?
That's a completely likely scenario, and it probably happens all the time in like Chicago, Illinois, that entire state boundary. But
and
again,
rural areas as well. Yeah.
Let me finish my thing. Is that okay, let's say you do that. Let's say in your judgment, you sell the gun to someone else. Here's something else that's a right-wing policy, pro-gun. Are you willing to take responsibility for the crimes that person commits with the sale of your weapon?
No.
I don't think so, but I would like to see that piece of legislation.
Ask
That's
a
like
question.
that's like saying a car man. Can I just get it? That's
Sure,
like
yeah,
saying a
okay.
car manufacturer should be responsible if someone buys a car from them and then runs people over.
I think he's talking strictly like
because
private gun
guns
sales.
Private gun sales. See, that's the big problem, is people trafficking weapons. These aren't your gun friends. These are people selling weapons illegally. This is what I mean by protect.
And that's why I want to see the legislation. I want to see how it's written.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you want to dig through, again, I guess we're crunched on time. If you want to dig through legislation with that, that's one thing. But the thing, again, I'm coming from a place, and maybe I'm doing a terrible job explaining it because I again had to hurry up on this topic. But the idea is to protect gun holders, and the way you do that is making sure the legal gun holders aren't being conflated with the illegal traffickers.
Question was around that specific law about penalizing the companies. Was that the law that Bernie Sanders was getting a lot of flack for during the Democratic debates, that he was like, I'm not for that?
Yeah.
Okay, thought so.
You said he wasn't for that, and he got lots of pushback.
Yeah, he was not for penalizing companies for crimes committed with their guns, because he's from Vermont. It's a more like it's more a pro-gun state, and he didn't support the legislation, and he got heat from within the Democratic Party during the debates.
That's a little different though. That's actually a little different. That legislation, I disagree with Bernie with that too. And what I'm talking about is actually something different. Whereas it's a lot. That's a gun company doing legal things and getting flack for it, versus this is a person doing illegal things and getting flack for it.
Private gun sales.
Private gun sales, I guess it should be the same standard should be held to dealerships if they just fucking do illegal shit in their backyard. But yeah.
Well, if a dealership's selling guns illegally, yes, they should be prosecuted.
And
they should lose their license and be fined and imprisoned, probably.
Yeah, and if they sell a gun to someone that goes shoot someone after that from selling it illegally, they should have some responsibility in that.
Yeah, it's called enforcing the law. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So hey, look, it looks like we actually agree on that note.
I'm kind of reasonable.
That's why I brought you on here.
And I'm not drunk.
Yet?
Yes.
Is that a yet question or
no? In reference to the other guy, he was pretty bad.
I didn't even.
That's my personal opinion.
Grew up with too many alcoholics, I guess, to tell.
I'm not even sure he was drunk.
I don't think he was drunk.
I think
Not
he was
drunk,
no.
No, he just does that.
Makes it worse. Yeah.
It's just perma drunk, I guess.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say this because I want to. I love Grumple. I love talking to him. He's a decent human being. I think he has a good heart. Maybe that's just because I'm a hippie, but yeah, he's not coming back on this program.
Totally reasonable.
the hippie authoritarian. I'm kidding. Yeah, it's your podcast. Run it how you like.
Makes Grumple the true winner of this debate.
All right.
Wow.
Are we done?
No.
Can I play Valorant?
Yep, we are done. Let's go around and do outros since
Are we playing
MindWaves.
Valorant? MindWaves?
Yep.
Yeah, with freemz if you're down.
MindWaves
Yeah,
is.
let's go.
Yep, we're done. This is it. So you can do your outros and you can play your video games, have fun.
Thank you so much, Dylan.
Oh.
I really appreciate you bringing me on this platform. I just want to tell everybody in chat, if you want to follow me, you can find me at MindWavesTV. Yeah, thanks for the conversation, guys. Yeah. We're doing outros, right, Dylan?
Yes, it's outros.
Can we do final points as well?
Oh yeah, final points too. Yeah, I'm just.
Who needs those?
It does seem important. Do you want to do a final point, MindWaves?
No. Guns are
What?
bad when they're in the hands of bad people, and we should seek to not let bad people have guns. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Final points and outro. Next will be Dary.
Oh, okay, I'm next. Yeah, so this is me at my worst when it comes to arguing, by the way, like very minimal preparation. So if you want to see like what good argument comes from this guy, then head over to my stream. Every point, every source, I always leave in Discord. I am way more prepared. So everything is always in my Discord. You can always check out the sources. You can always add to the conversation. I'm literally DaryKohi on everything. Look, I'm prepared. I wasn't sure if oh fuck, this is bad. Never mind. That's a bad example. I guess for final points is that it seems like reducing guns to a certain point, not to infringe people's rights, but reducing guns to a certain point will have good effects on the country. Just lowering the massive amount of gun deaths. There are plenty of countries that have a gun every other person, but for some reason their gun deaths are much, much lower than this country. And again, as a patriot, I want the United States to be the best. I don't want it to be comparable with a place like Honduras. I want our shoot to be better than any other Western country, and we can do that by taking a responsible look into gun laws.
Okay, next is going to be last username.
So obviously, this is a messy issue. I mean, if there was a simple answer, I'm sure we would have heard it by now. And so I guess, and I don't have the answers to these problems, but I guess I'll just say that, a libertarian society, a society where people have maximum individual choice and are accountable for their choices is just the kind of mechanism that you need to solve problems like this, right? People who own private property can set their own policies about what kind of gun policy they have on their property. But if they, depend on the associations, on the people who come onto their property, then they have an incentive to try to be as permissive as possible, right? You're a store and you want customers who want to carry guns, then you have to consider that when you're considering your choice. And I think that governments and democratic governments don't properly have that accountability mechanism. So complicated problems like this are exactly the kind of thing that free markets are good at solving and do the best job at harnessing the sort of intelligence of the entire society at working out optimal solutions to. And if you want to find more about free markets, then check out my channel, _username at Twitch. Good to be here. Thanks, Dylan, for putting this on. Good talk, everyone.
Thank you. And who said shooting to be better?
That was Dary.
That was Dary? Okay. I think I might have to ban a second person today. Next, we're going to go to BrentoBox.
That was an accidental pun.
Okay. I liked it. Yeah, as I've said a couple times, I don't have real strong takes on guns other than I do believe that people have an individual right to own guns. I think I think just the fact that guns exist means that you have to deal with them, and I think understanding that everyone should have should have access to them, equal access, as a matter of self-protection in a country where people are responsible for their own well-being, I suppose, or where we value personal responsibility. I do think there's something to be protected. That's why I'm very wary about anyone who wants to over-legislate guns, and so I don't have an answer to it. I don't have an answer to the correct amount of gun restrictions. I think that what we see in gun violence across the nation is a result of maybe larger issues like mental health and social problems. And so saying that we need to lower the amount of guns around, well, it would absolutely have an effect. But I'm very weary about giving up any kind of civil liberties to achieve that kind of effect.
Okay, and who are you, and where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm BrentoBox. You can usually find me on Twitch panels or on my channel at twitch.tv/BrentoBox. And so if you want to, drop a follow and hop on by.
Awesome. Next is going to be freemz.
Hey, I unmuted this time first. I feel like I've been in these conversations a lot, and you hear everybody say, like, yeah, I want to fix this problem, but then one side wants to go as far as they can that way and try to take all the guns away. They want everything, and then one side doesn't want to budge at all. And so I just feel like stuff's going to stay the same. But twitch.tv/freemz, I do politics and roundtables.
Wonderful. Scuff Dario?
The only should I go? Sorry.
Again, man, you know what? I'll let this one slide. What is it? What's the quip?
No, I was
it
just
better
gonna
be great.
say, well,
it better
it's
be
really
great.
easy to be a Republican on this issue because all you have to say is no, right? That's the policy proposal. It's just no.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
No, I want national reciprocity. Come on.
Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, it's not even worth it. Yeah.
Okay, let's not go back. Let's come on. We're all ending. Let's all be simple. Scuff Dario. Bring some of that Bosnian and Danish generosity and kindness into the stream. Let's send it on a positive note.
Fuck all of you guys. No. No, I think the issue of guns is an interesting proxy for something that I consider to be like a more important question, sort of a question of freedom, a question of like how far does individual freedoms go, and like do you consider freedom to be an end or a mean? And also a question that we didn't get to talk too much about, unfortunately, today, but that I really like talking about as well, is also the concept of effective freedom. So just because you have free rules doesn't mean that everybody effectively has the highest amount of freedom to exercise within those rules. If you want to hear me talk about that or ramble about sort of more philosophical concepts that go behind the prescriptive statements or policy issues that we discuss, you can find me on twitch.tv/scuffdario. I'll probably go offline now, but I'll go online again on Sunday, where I will also be able to be found on another panel show called the Tree of Logic's panel show. So yeah, if you're interested, give me a follow, and hope to see you then.
If
Promoting
the show couldn't get
Tree's
any
panel on Dylan's panel, that's brave.
man, oh boy!
I thought it was a good one.
Man, if there's any way to make this stream more stressful,
Wait, do Dylan and Tree have an altercation?
Hey, Dylan, I forgot to thank you for having me on as well. I haven't been on one of these in a while, so thanks for inviting me.
Hey man, I'm just happy you're back making content, man. I appreciate seeing your face again.
Dylan actually invited me for like every one of these during my hiatus, I think too. I appreciate that. I told you to, but
I always wanted there to be a seat open for you. And I see Battle Lounge in chat. I saw Battle Lounge was really close to 1,000 followers the other day. So if anybody can go drop him a follow, that'd be really cool. And last is Ross Lewis.
Hey, Ross W. Lewis on Twitch. For my final points is just why is it that so many in America join gangs, commit self-harm, or kill others? Why is there so little trust in our country right now when we had so much trust earlier? If guns were gone, these problems would still be there. So I think what's causing these problems are things like income inequality, lack of personal responsibility, lack of spirituality, no control over the government unless you're rich, the welfare state, and single parenting, among many, many other things. If we could focus on making individuals' lives better and finding this soul of America that was sort of mentioned, I think we wouldn't need to necessarily talk about guns. But to cap it off, thank you very much, Dylan, for having us. And for some reason, no one has said the words Twitch Prime during this, which I find interesting. So I didn't want this to end without someone saying Twitch Prime. And
the MindWavesTV. Thank you.
Yes, because if there's anyone's conduct we want to encourage, it's the Beanie Boy. And sorry, Turk, I just wanted to bully you. You're the new guy, so I have to bully you. You say your final point in your outro.
Yeah, so given the, political climate nowadays, I find it kind of funny that we're trying to get rid and defund of the police. At that point, having a firearm is pretty important. So if you can find one and you're a responsible adult, I recommend exercising your Second Amendment right. Of course, be responsible, get training and all that good stuff. But yeah, sometimes you can't rely on the government to protect you, and that's kind of what we're seeing. Politics is a curd.
I'd love to have a conversation with TheTerk about police reform. I think that'd be a lot more interesting if you'd ever be down. Just letting you know.